Hey guys! Tonight we drift gently into the soft mist hanging over the Mekong Delta, where water is everywhere beneath your feet, around your boat, inside your clothes. The air is cool in a damp kind of way, and you're wrapped in that strange morning silence that exists only just before a market wakes up. Ahead of you, wooden boats bump softly together like sleepy animals, waiting for their owners to rouse them into action. Everything smells faintly of riverweed, fermented shrimp, and something slightly sweet, maybe jackfruit, maybe just the scent of damp bamboo. You breathe it in anyway. You're floating past homes on stilts, some with chickens roosting on rafts, others with laundry flapping like sleepy flags. It's the kind of morning that makes you feel both calm and slightly sticky. This is ancient southern Vietnam, maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe longer. The calendar is fuzzy, but the river market is already bustling beneath the stillness. This was how people lived, not on land, but on water. Boats were bedrooms, storage rooms, restaurants, grocery stores, and sometimes, yes, places to bathe, though you wouldn't want to be downstream when that happened. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere warm tonight, leave your city and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boat is a slender wooden canoe, barely wider than your hips. It doesn't rock unless you breathe wrong, so naturally you've already almost flipped it twice. You balance carefully as you drift toward a cluster of floating docks. The first vendors are just arriving, paddling with long oars that look like overgrown soup spoons. Their boats are loaded with cargo bundles of lemongrass, ginger stalks, fat green bananas still attached to the trunk. The docks are slippery from the mist, and somewhere behind a curtain of reeds, someone is heating tea over a tiny clay stove. It's not yet sunrise, but already the river groans softly under the weight of goods and gossip. You trail a hand through the water, warm, brown, and thick like miso soup left out too long. This river has held generations. It has swallowed wedding rings, baby teeth, and probably a few unfortunate merchants who tried to shortchange the wrong grandma. There's something haunting about the sound of wooden hulls tapping each other, like a watery heartbeat. Each tap means trade rice exchanged for salt, fish for fabric, gossip for a handful of betel leaves. Everything is mobile. Nothing here has a fixed address. The market shifts with the current and shrinks or expands depending on the moon and the flood. Historians still argue whether these river markets began as simple trading spots or evolved from ceremonial boat gatherings. Some believe they were offshoots of ancient rituals tied to ancestor worship and the rice spirit, combining commerce with cosmology. Others insist it was just practical roads flooded, so boats filled the gap. You pass by a wide raft piled with coconuts. The vendor, a wrinkled man with a straw hat that's more hole than hat, slices the top off one and hands it to you with a grin. It tastes earthy, not sweet, like water pretending to be fruit. He nods approvingly at your polite wince and slurps from his own coconut like it's the finest champagne. At the far edge of the market, a young girl crouches in her boat, rearranging bundles of morning glory and water spinach. She's not more than 9, but her arms move with the certainty of someone who's been selling vegetables since she could crawl. A parrot squawks from a perch above her head, and you're not sure if it's mimicking the bargaining call or just swearing in parrot Vietnamese. Farther still, an old woman in a sampan stacked high with gourds leans over to light a mosquito coil. The smoke spirals like incense, a sacred offering to sanity in the face of insect warfare. Mosquitoes are a given here. They hum in the background like nature's white noise, though you suspect they're plotting something bigger. A fringe fact for you in some parts of the Delta: traders believed the river's mist was inhabited by protective spirits. Before opening for the day, they would sprinkle a few drops of rice wine into the water as an offering not to the gods, but to the ghosts of drowned merchants who might still be looking for better deals. As the sun begins to rise orange, thick and sluggish like egg yolk, the mist lifts. Boats jostle into tighter knots. Voices rise, and suddenly the sleepy hum becomes a concert of splashes, chatter, and the thunk of wooden poles. This is when the market really breathes. You're in it now, adrift in history, paddling slowly through the veins of a people who have always made their living on water. And just as you're getting comfortable, someone calls out behind you in a sing-song tone that might mean, "Hello, buy something," or "You're about to be hit by my boat." Probably all three. You turn around in time to see a narrow sampan gliding toward you at an alarming speed for something that doesn't have an engine. A boy no older than 13 stands at the bow, using a long bamboo pole to steer. His boat is crammed with baskets, big ones, little ones, some leaking what looks like coriander, others puffing steam from tightly wrapped banana leaf bundles. The boat gently taps yours, and the boy grins. He doesn't say a word, just gestures to the goods with the flourish of a magician, revealing a particularly leafy rabbit. You nod like you're about to make a purchase, even though you're not sure what half of it is. Some things look like roots. Some things look like bugs. Some things definitely are bugs. This is what people did before supermarkets, before barcodes, cashiers, and self-checkout lanes with passive-aggressive voices. They brought the store to the water, and if the store sank, they just swam for the cabbage and tried again tomorrow. You paddle alongside a series of low, flat boats, each one a floating stall. You spot women in wide-brimmed, non-la hats, flipping pancakes on clay stoves. The scent is heavenly rice batter, scallions, shrimp paste, and the faint, smoky tinge of wood ash. It's breakfast on the water, and nobody seems concerned about the risk of fire. One wrong move and the whole market could go up like a New Year's firecracker display. Historians still debate whether these floating kitchens developed naturally over time or were part of a broader cultural shift from land-based to amphibious living. Some argue it was about mobility and escaping taxation from land-bound rulers. Others say it was the logical response to monsoon floods and stubborn soil. You steer closer to one vendor who's selling what looks like roasted bananas. He catches your interest and waves a fan dramatically over his goods. They're charred, soft, and smell like sugar left too long on a grill. You try one. It's gooey, hot, and sweet, with that kind of burnt edge that tastes better than it should. You make the international face of, "Oh wow, that's hotter than expected." And he laughs. Next to him is an older woman arranging herbal tea packets in neat rows. Dried chrysanthemum, artichoke flowers, and lotus seeds fill her wooden crates. Each is wrapped in faded paper with smudged ink. You ask which one helps you sleep. She points to one, then gestures with her hand like a descending bird. You get the message, drink, then crash. A fringe detail for your dreams tonight. Some merchants believed the spirits of the river could bless their goods or curse them depending on how respectfully they docked. If you tied your boat rudely or crossed another trader's mooring line, it wasn't just bad manners. It could doom your whole haul to spoilage or mysterious rot. You drift onward past a floating noodle stall. The cook balances a pot on what seems to be a single flame, and yet nothing has exploded. She ladles steaming broth into bowls that she hands across boats with a set of chopsticks as long as your arm. Miraculously, nothing spills. Meanwhile, your own chopstick skills remain. Aspirational. And then you spot them, the floating baskets. Not stalls, not boats. Just wide, woven baskets bobbing on the water, tethered with ropes to bigger vessels. Inside, vegetables float in netting eggplants with skins like polished stone, bitter melons that look like green grenades, and cucumbers bigger than your foot. They sway gently, as if the river is cradling them. You're reminded how closely this market mirrors the ecosystem around it. The goods are seasonal, local, and fresh in the most literal sense. No refrigeration, no preservatives, just water, sun, and a daily gamble against rot. The boats, too, are part of the rhythm. Some are carved from single tree trunks, others nailed together from scavenged wood. All of them bear scars, patches, burn marks, names in faded paint. Every one of them has seen floods, typhoons, and the occasional river brawl over disputed cabbage. You pause at a vendor selling puffed rice cakes. They're stacked like golden bricks and smell of toasted grain. You ask how they're made. She taps the metal drum beside her, points to a bicycle pump, and grins. You realize the rice is popped explosively, pressure cooking with a side of minor terror. A kid nearby sets one off, and the bang echoes across the water like a firework. A heron flaps away indignantly. This is not a quiet market. It may be sleepy, but it is not silent. It hums. It pops. It sings with the creak of boats and the slap of water against wood. Conversations bounce from boat to boat like a never-ending river opera. And above it all, the sun begins to shine harder now. You squint under your own makeshift hat, and everything turns gold and glare. You can see the shimmer of fish scales as a vendor dumps out a fresh haul catfish, eels, even a few that look too prehistoric to eat. Just then, a sudden splash. Something big. You turn fast, heart racing. Was it a fish? A crocodile? A capsized boat? Turns out, it was a vendor falling in while reaching for her runaway papayas. Her boat neighbor pulls her up with practiced ease, laughing as she hands over a dripping fruit. No one panics? It's just Tuesday? You drift on, the water swirling gently around you, full of stories both told and hidden. Your canoe bumps softly against a slow-moving raft as you pass into a narrower bend in the market. The river here is a little darker, more enclosed by overhanging palms, and the boats are smaller, stacked tighter like puzzle pieces with engines replaced by arms and paddles. You're no longer drifting past the big players. This is the small stall zone, the mom-and-pop shops of the floating world. These boats are woven like baskets, curved at the ends and coated in pitch that smells faintly medicinal. You notice vendors seated low, legs tucked under them like origami, expertly retying bundles of herbs or picking bugs off leafy vegetables. It's calming in a chaotic sort of way, like watching 1,000 things happen all at once but slowly. You pause beside a woman in her 60s who's hunched over a small mound of chopped galangal, lemongrass, and a suspiciously fiery-looking chili paste. She catches your eye and scoops a spoonful of it into a banana leaf for you. You taste it, instantly regret it, and your eyes start to water. She nods, satisfied. Welcome to Vietnam's oldest condiment, the famed nuoc mam, or fish sauce. This place practically bathes in it. Every family has a version. Every village claims theirs is the best, and every market sells it by the jug. The process is simple: layer fish and salt in a clay jar. Leave it alone for months, then collect the liquid gold that rises. Simple, but the smell. The smell could end friendships. Historians still argue whether nuoc mam originated purely in Vietnam or whether it evolved from older Southeast Asian fermentation traditions. Some even point to Roman garum as a distant cousin. The connection both reek and both taste better than they smell, at least according to the brave. You float past a man who's pouring fish sauce into tiny ceramic jugs shaped like animals. He lines them up neatly, as if to say, "Here, have a slightly terrifying gift." A little girl buys one shaped like a pig and carries it off proudly, unaware that she'll be smelling like fermented anchovy for the next 2 days. And if you thought fish sauce was the boldest thing for sale, you're not even close. To your left, a boat stacked with fermented bamboo shoots glistens under the sun. They smell like socks boiled in vinegar and then left in a cave for the summer. It's oddly compelling. You lean in closer and nearly fall out of your canoe. The vendor offers you a fermented egg. You decline, and she shrugs like she's seen your kind before. A fringe note for tonight's dreams in some coastal river markets. Vendors would whisper short prayers over their fish sauce jars before sealing them, believing the spirits of the sea needed acknowledgement for lending their bounty. Some even left rice grains on the riverbank as an offering before fermenting season. You continue drifting, now aware that the air has layers cooked, smells, raw smells, and in-between smells that defy description. It's a constant balance between the familiar and the what on earth is that. One moment, you're inhaling fried tofu. The next, you're slapped with the sour sting of pickled crab. You glance up just in time to see a stork glide overhead, its wings flapping in slow, deliberate beats. The people here don't flinch. Birds are just part of the ceiling. So are snakes, frogs, and lizards, some of which occasionally drop in as uninvited guests. You hear a thud on a boat behind you, followed by laughter and the unmistakable sound of something being chased with a paddle. Your journey takes a turn into a quieter tributary. Here, the market has fewer voices, but more smells, sturdier wares. You pass a seller with clay jars so large you could hide inside one. She's shouting prices into the air like a town crier. And somehow, someone across the water shouts back a counteroffer. Negotiations are often more dramatic than the sale itself. A younger boy rows up next to you. His boat is stacked with tiny jars of tamarind paste and palm sugar wrapped in leaves. He doesn't speak, just points. You buy one out of curiosity and open it. The taste is sour, sweet, earthy, like a tree having an emotional breakdown in your mouth. You love it. He smiles. It's here that you notice how the river connects more than just goods, it binds generations. Grandparents teach grandchildren how to bargain, how to prep the perfect display, how to make a customer feel like family before charging them double. It's part art, part survival. And while the modern world scrolls through delivery apps and digital checkout, this floating system hums along, ancient and immediate, fading and enduring all at once. The sun rises higher, shadows shorten. You notice more hats being dipped in water, then worn again, instant evaporative cooling, ancient Vietnamese air conditioning. A few vendors slip cloths over their shoulders, soaked in the same river water they sell their goods from. Hygiene is a flexible concept. Then again, you probably wouldn't survive this market without a sturdy stomach and a good sense of humor. As you move forward, a man with a long pole gently pushes your canoe away from his tomato crates. His boat lists to one side, overloaded with gourds, dried mushrooms, and a cage of ducklings that won't stop squeaking. He doesn't say anything, just smiles, and lets the river carry you on. You drift along slowly now, the river narrowing into a winding path where the current does half the work for you. Trees lean close on both banks, their roots exposed like the knuckles of ancient hands. You pass a low-hanging branch decorated with what looks like someone's laundry, or perhaps an offering. You're not entirely sure, and you're not about to ask. Ahead, you see movement, a little splash, then a ripple. You squint. It's a basket. No, wait, it's several baskets, all of them wriggling slightly. You get closer and realize they're alive. Welcome to the eel and frog section. It's less a section and more a chaotic zone of hopping, slithering goods. The boats here are shallow, wide, and crowded with tubs, buckets, and woven traps. One vendor is elbow-deep in a basin of slippery eels, scooping them out with the casual efficiency of someone who's done this 1,000 times and only occasionally lost one down her shirt. You edge your canoe closer and try not to make eye contact with the frogs. They are not pleased. Their boat is a chorus of rivets, splashes, and the occasional ambitious leap. One lands on a paddle and considers escape. You hand it back to the vendor, who gives you a nod like you've passed some sort of test. Historians still argue whether frogs were considered a delicacy of the elite or a necessity of the working class. Some records say they were prized for temple offerings. Others say they were just easy to catch, easy to cook, and tasted enough like chicken to forgive the feat. You spot a child with a homemade net poking at a tub of catfish. The fish look prehistoric flatheads, long whiskers, and eyes that seem mildly offended by your presence. The boy giggles and offers you one to hold. You politely decline. He shrugs and tries again on the next passing boat. Next to the eels is a vendor with an entire setup devoted to snails. Big ones, small ones, some painted with chalk to show they're still alive. He plucks one from a basket and taps the shell. It retracts slightly. Satisfied, he drops it into a bamboo container labeled charmingly extra wiggly. Fun fringe detail, some floating markets held informal wiggle contests to see who had the liveliest catch. The winner didn't get a prize, just bragging rights and a better spot next market day. It's unclear whether this was serious tradition or just a good excuse to shout across boats. You paddle onward, dodging a cluster of buckets being rinsed in the river. One of them contains something that might be sea cucumbers or old sponges. You're too afraid to ask. The boat beside you sells frog legs marinated in turmeric and chili, ready to be skewered and grilled. The vendor offers you a sample. You take the smallest bite imaginable. It's spicy, chewy, and not entirely unpleasant until you think too hard about the texture. All around you, the sounds are different now. It's less shouting, more splashing, less bargaining, more sloshing. The vendors here are quiet, focused. Selling live animals takes more concentration. You get the sense that if you reach into the wrong bucket, you might pull back a very wet, very angry surprise. At one boat, a woman fans a grill covered with small, skewered frogs. Their legs crisp in the fire while their tiny torsos curl. She hums a song you don't recognize. It's slow, hypnotic. You catch yourself swaying with the river's rhythm. A man a few boats down is stirring something in a pot that smells challenging. You catch a whiff of fermented crab and instantly remember that your stomach is a fragile thing. He sees your reaction and laughs, then offers a tiny bowl anyway. You accept, you sip, you regret. But to him, it's a delicacy. A sour, savory sludge that pairs perfectly with rice and the boldness to ignore what it looks like. He gestures proudly to a row of jars lined up on the boat's edge. Inside are layers of shell, meat, and mystery. Historians have unearthed jars like these in ancient riverside communities, suggesting that fermentation techniques in Vietnam go back thousands of years. Whether developed for flavor, preservation, or sheer daredevilry is still up for debate. You take a break from brave eating and float past a narrow canoe piled with lotus pods. The vendor plucks one open and hands you a handful of seeds. They're soft, sweet, almost nutty. A perfect palate cleanser after the frog fiesta. A heron stands perched on the stern of one boat, watching you like a judgmental dinner guest. It flaps once, then takes off with an elegant lurch, its long legs trailing like forgotten ribbons. You pass a vendor with nothing but baskets of riverweed green, fragrant, slick. She piles it high and says it's perfect for soup, hair rinses, and apparently mosquito bites. You take some, why not? You've survived fish sauce, fermented crab, and frog legs. What's a little salad from the river? You lean back now, letting the current do its thing. The frog chorus fades behind you, replaced by the gentle clink of clay pots and the occasional snort of a water buffalo from the bank. The trees open up again, the sun returns in full, and the river breathes. You take a deep breath with it. The air is heavier here, denser with stories. You don't know all of them, but the river remembers. The water widens again, and with it, the atmosphere lightens. The tight clumps of wriggling creatures are behind you now. Up ahead, you hear a new kind of sound, a sharp metallic clatter, followed by a low whoosh, then a satisfying sizzle. You squint. Smoke, rising in gentle spirals from a boat that looks more like a kitchen than anything seaworthy. You've entered the floating food court. The boats here are fitted with wok stations, chopping boards, baskets of greens, bottles of oil, and piles of noodles coiled like sleeping snakes. The cooks stand steady, even as the river rocks gently beneath their feet. They move with the grace of dancers, ladle in one hand, spatula in the other, flicking flames higher than should be legal on open water. You paddle up to a woman who's deep-frying dough sticks in bubbling oil. The batter hisses as it hits the pan, the aroma a perfect storm of golden crisp and childhood memory, even if this isn't your childhood. She drops 2 sticks into a banana leaf pouch and hands them to you with a wink. You take a bite. Crunchy, fluffy, slightly greasy, completely worth it. A nearby man fans his grill over a row of skewers, chicken, pork, mystery meat, all glistening with a caramelized glaze. He motions toward a container of dipping sauce, and you recognize the vinegary sting of tamarind. You dip, you chew, you smile involuntarily. Historians still argue whether this type of mobile cooking developed organically or in reaction to tighter land restrictions along the rivers. Some think floating kitchens were simply an extension of communal eating spaces where food wasn't just fuel, but glue, the kind that bound families, strangers, and gossip all together. You drift past a boat where the cook is tossing noodles high into the air, catching them in the wok with perfect timing. Children on a nearby boat cheer like it's a festival. One shouts something you don't understand, but it's definitely praise. You clap, too. The cook bows theatrically without missing a beat. A fringe delight, some vendors believed cooking on water added flavor to the dish. Not metaphorically, literally. There were whispered beliefs that the river spirits favored food prepared on moving water, blessing it with flow energy. If you cooked on still land, it was just soup. On the river, it became a memory. You spot a stall specializing in ban xeo, crispy turmeric crepes stuffed with bean sprouts, shrimp, and sometimes, if you're lucky, pork belly. The cook folds them with precision, letting the edges crisp to a near glass-like crunch. You're handed one wrapped in greens and dipped into a light fish sauce. You take a bite, and the crepe shatters like autumn leaves. You wonder if you've peaked. Maybe this is the best bite of your life. The sun is high now. Beads of sweat gather at your neck, and you're starting to stick to the boat's wooden bench. So naturally, you reach for a drink. You spot a vendor shaking a jar filled with chunks of fruit, ice, and something fizzy. It's Sam Lan, a cooling herbal drink made from roots, sugar cane, and wildflowers. He ladles it into a cup with a massive cube of river-chilled ice and hands it over. You sip. It tastes like sweet rain, ancient trees, and the relief of sitting in front of a fan after a long day. You thank him, and he responds with a riddle. Or maybe it's a proverb. Either way, he paddles off before you can ask what it meant. Across from him is a young woman selling sweet soups, mung bean, lotus seed, longan fruit served warm or cold depending on your mood. She offers a free sample and asks, hot heart or cold head? You opt for cold head. She smiles and hands you a chilled bowl with cubes of jelly and lychee, swimming in coconut milk. As you eat, a small fight breaks out nearby. Nothing serious. Just 2 vendors arguing over whose stove smoke is drifting into the other's boat. It ends with both of them laughing, splashing river water over their pots to cool things down. A cat watches from one of the boats, tail flicking lazily, clearly used to this kind of drama. You push onward, now slower. The river here is heavy with the smell of cooked rice, grilled meats, and herbs crushed underfoot. It's oddly soothing, the scent of 1,000 meals prepared for 1,000 strangers, all floating gently by each other. Some boats offer che, a sweet dessert soup served in rainbow layers. You pick a cup layered with beans, jelly, and bright purple taro. It's confusing at first, sweet beans in soup, but as the flavors blend, you find yourself nodding, then sipping faster. There's a reason people eat this during festivals. You think? It tastes like celebration. A little girl, no older than 5, floats by in a basin. Not a boat, a literal wash basin. She has a ladle in one hand and a serious look in her eyes. Her mother laughs from the nearby stall and tells her to steer left. The girl does, expertly avoiding your canoe like a seasoned captain. You salute her. She doesn't salute back. She's all business. You finally let your paddle rest across your lap, hands sticky with sugar and soot, stomach full, face flushed. The food court is behind you now, but the scent lingers, drifting with the current like perfume in a letter. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sun warm your skin and the soft slap of water on wood lull your thoughts into something slower, something ancient, something that doesn't need to rush. You ease your paddle back into the water, letting your canoe trail lazily along the edge of the next cluster of boats. The air is thicker here, less smoky from cooking fires, more herbal and strangely fragrant. A warm breeze carries hints of dried bark, licorice root, and crushed mint. You pass a wide raft with bundles of greenery hanging from ropes, drying in the sun like laundry from a very enthusiastic witch. You've entered the apothecary zone. These boats don't shout. They don't sizzle. They sit quietly, almost solemnly, like shrines of leafy potential. You float past a woman slowly slicing lengths of cinnamon bark, her knife whispering against the grain. She doesn't look up, doesn't rush. Her motion is slow and repetitive like prayer. Around her, small wooden drawers are labeled with words you can't read, but you're fairly certain they include things like for fever, for flatulence, and for that one kind of sadness. One man's boat is lined entirely with glass jars filled with dark, mysterious liquids. They glint like gemstones in the sun amber, green, blood red. Some are bubbling gently. Others seem to shimmer with something thicker than time. You look closer and realize one jar has a whole snake curled inside it, stiff as a noodle, but somehow still menacing. He smiles. Good for joints, he says. You nod, as if your knees have been particularly offensive lately. Historians still debate the origins of river market medicine. Some believe it evolved directly from court healers, who fell out of favor and returned to the countryside. Others argue it was always grassroots mothers, grandmothers, midwives all learning from the forest and passing knowledge like family recipes. The reality, as always, is probably both. A fringe belief whispered along certain parts of the delta that river medicine worked better if the herbs were washed in the current itself. That soaking a root in the right bend of the river, under the right moon, could open its healing memory. Science disagrees, but the people who buy these roots don't need proof, they just need relief. You pull up beside a narrow skiff stacked high with baskets of dried plants, star anise, lemongrass, pandan leaves, ginseng, lotus petals, and a few others that resemble crumpled socks. You pick one up and sniff. It smells like eucalyptus and regret. The vendor tells you it's good for clearing nightmares. You buy 3. Further on, another woman is grinding something in a mortar. The rhythmic thud-thud-thud echoes through the boats, like a heartbeat. Her mixture includes garlic, turmeric, and something you swear is bark. She offers you a taste. You take a tiny pinch and place it on your tongue. It's sharp, earthy, and leaves your mouth tingling. She beams and says something about protection from the wind. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it feels true somehow. On the next boat, a shirtless old man is preparing what looks like a poultice. He's humming and gently applying a paste onto a wide banana leaf. As you approach, he holds it up and mimics applying it to his own forehead, then gives a thumbs up. Headaches. Got it. He offers you a smaller packet wrapped in betel leaf. You hesitate, remembering the previous frog leg incident, but he insists. You sniff spicy, minty, slightly sweet. You tuck it into your pocket like a good luck charm. Off to the side, a boy is selling small bundles tied with string and labeled with symbols charms. He points to one and says, "For love," then another, "For strength." He picks up the last and grins, "For forgetting." You stare at that one a little longer than expected. The boy shrugs and tosses it into the water. "No need to remember everything," he says. You pass a few boats displaying dried lizards, coiled snakes, bundles of bones. You're not sure if they're medicine or decoration. Possibly both. A tiny altar flickers with incense. A bowl of rice rests beside a wooden statue of a river spirit with many arms and an almost smug smile. The wind shifts. The incense smoke curls into your boat like a ribbon. You're not quite sure whether you're being cured or cursed, but either way, the place smells amazing. Another vendor invites you to try a foot soak. He has clay basins filled with hot river water, herbs, and smooth pebbles. You hesitate, but your toes ache, so you climb into his boat, dangle your feet in, and sigh. It's bliss. The herbs fizz slightly around your ankles. A cat lounges nearby, judging your posture. You sip a tiny cup of bitter tea offered by an older woman seated at the back of the boat. Her face is lined like a topographic map, each wrinkle probably marking some long-forgotten folk remedy. She says nothing, just watches you as the tea works its strange magic. It's bitter, it's sweet, it's something. You feel a little lighter, or maybe just slightly dazed. You thank her, paddle away slowly, and feel the tingle in your legs from the soak. The aches are gone, or maybe forgotten. The herbal zone fades behind you, replaced by silence and scattered birdsong. The river widens again, lazy and reflective. You pass a boat with wind chimes made from dried gourds and tin spoons. They clink and clatter in the breeze like distant laughter. You breathe in the mingled scents mint, cinnamon, river mud, and wonder if you've just passed through a dream disguised as a pharmacy. The air grows sweeter as you float onward, carried by the quiet lull of the river and the faint hum of voices ahead. You round a slow bend and are met with a welcome sight: fruit boats. They line the river like a parade of color and chaos, piled high with tropical treasures that spill over the sides in neat, precarious stacks. This is where your nose takes charge. The smell of ripe papaya, sugary pineapple, and freshly split coconuts hits you all at once, followed by something sharper: pomelo rind, maybe, or the sour peel of tamarind. It's not so much a market as it is a buffet with no walls, only water. You glide up to a boat stacked entirely with green-skinned mangoes, their surfaces lightly bruised, promising sweetness beneath. The vendor sees your interest and tosses you one with practiced aim. You catch it, just barely, and she gestures for you to eat. No cutting, no prep, just bite. So you do. And instantly, juice dribbles down your chin and wrist, sticky and electric. It's sweet, yes, but there's a twist of acidity that makes your jaw shiver. You laugh, unprepared. The vendor nods solemnly, like you've passed a rite of passage. You try to thank her, but end up mostly just licking your fingers. Historians still debate which fruit was the most traded across Vietnam's river markets. Mangoes, jackfruit, lychee, durian. They all had their seasons, their followers, their secret fans. Some scholars argue pomelos were the real power fruit offered to gods, ancestors, and used in shadowy riverside rituals now lost to memory. Others claim the humble banana, with its endless varieties, ruled both bellies and bartering tables. Next to the mango boat floats a vendor sitting on a throne of watermelons. He slices one open with a flourish, revealing an interior so red it could light a campfire. He cuts you a wedge and hands it over without asking for anything in return. You eat it with both hands, juice pooling in the grooves of your knuckles. It's perfect. Cool, crisp, a cold slap of refreshment in the rising heat. You spot a row of boats selling nothing but citrus bitter limes, sweet mandarins, and massive pomelos stacked like green cannonballs. One woman peels a pomelo in a spiral, revealing its glistening pearls of fruit inside. She offers you a segment. It pops in your mouth like a small explosion. Your eyebrows raise. She chuckles. You may have accidentally proposed. Another boat sells fruit you don't even recognize, things with spines, scales, and colors that belong in dreams or cartoons. You pick up a rambutan and examine its fuzzy red skin. It looks like a tropical sea urchin trying to flirt. The vendor shows you how to crack it open. Inside is white, glossy flesh, sweet and slippery like a lychee on vacation. A fringe belief from certain market towns: if a vendor gives you a fruit without weighing or charging for it, and you accept it without asking questions, you've made a deal. Not a monetary one, a fate one. You now owe them a kindness equal to the sweetness of the gift. Some say it's just superstition. Others have found themselves delivering fish at sunrise for reasons they can't explain. You steer toward a slower boat carrying nothing but bananas. Dozens of types, all different shapes and shades, some short and stubby, others long and firm, some even red. The vendor peels one, hands it over with a nod, and you eat it because that's what you do here. It's dense, earthy, less sugary than the ones you're used to. It tastes honest. A child floats by in a woven basket full of mangosteens. He's tiny, sunburned, and deadly serious about his stock. You buy one just to support his entrepreneurial spirit. He grunts approval and paddles away like a general inspecting his troops. The fruit boats are joyful places, laughing women in broad hats, kids dipping their feet into the water, the occasional burst of a coconut being cracked open with a machete. You pass a boat where two sisters are arguing over who sold more guavas today. They're throwing halves of fruit at each other. You catch one mid-air, bite it, and drift past without saying a word. It's the best guava you've ever had. As you float on, your canoe rocks gently with the wake of a bigger boat, one loaded with pineapples. The vendor there is carving spirals into the flesh with a speed that borders on magic. You watch him for a while, hypnotized by the swirl of yellow and gold. The sun climbs higher, making everything glow. The fruit glistens, the river sparkles. Even your skin starts to feel candied in the heat. You pass one last vendor selling chilled sugarcane juice. He presses stalks through a metal crank, and out comes liquid sunshine. You take a cup, sip, and feel the cool slide of sugar and grass and afternoon nap drip down your throat. You lean back in your canoe, feet up, juice in hand, and sigh. For just a moment, the world is nothing but the sweetness of fruit, the bob of the water, and the soft hum of voices bartering in the sun. Your canoe drifts lazily out of the orchard-like warmth of the fruit boats, gliding into a quieter stretch where the hum of voices softens and a curious rhythm takes over. It's not drums, it's not shouting, it's singing. No, not quite. It's more like chanting. A musical bargaining call echoing across the water in slow, lilting phrases. You paddle toward it, curious, and find yourself in a part of the market that functions like a live opera crossed with a farmer's co-op. The boats here are anchored close together, and their vendors are not just selling, they're performing. Their voices rise and fall in sing-song patterns, announcing wares, deals, and even insults, all in the same musical cadence. It's part sales pitch, part social commentary, and entirely captivating. You pull up to a woman with a voice like a gong round, clear and impossible to ignore. She's selling garlic and shallots, but it's her melody that draws the crowd. Every phrase ends with a dramatic flourish, like a musical exclamation point. She throws in an occasional rhyme or pun, and the nearby vendors either applaud or heckle, depending on the quality of the joke. A man across from her calls back with his own melody, offering dried chilies and claiming they're hot enough to curse a ghost. His voice is raspy, gravelly, and absolutely delightful. You begin to understand this is market theater. Historians still argue whether these chanting calls began as a necessity, overcrowded boats trying to rise above the noise or as a form of cultural expression. Some suggest the rhythms mimic old rice harvest songs. Others think they stem from lullabies passed between generations, repurposed here for capitalism. Whatever the truth, it's as much entertainment as advertisement. You paddle between the performers, trying not to interrupt the flow. One older man is calling out prices in a slow baritone, accompanied by a wooden clapper he slaps against his palm. Another vendor harmonizes with a metal spoon against her cooking pot. You realize this is a symphony of small business. A fringe delight some particularly competitive vendors would spend days composing new sales chants, testing them on family members before debuting them at market. There were rumors of secret rehearsals and stolen jingles. Once, apparently, two beetle nut sellers had a literal sing-off that ended with one jumping into the river out of embarrassment or victory. Accounts differ. You pause beside a vendor selling sugar and salt, arranged in colorful mounds like miniature sand dunes. She doesn't chant, but she claps rhythmically with two pieces of bamboo, keeping time with the boats around her. Her dog lies curled under a basket, thumping its tail in sync. The whole thing feels like a coordinated stage production, only with more snacks. You find yourself humming along to a tune without realizing it. It's contagious. Each boat seems to have its own key, its own rhythm, but somehow they blend a floating chorus of commerce and community. The music isn't just sales talk, it's gossip, too. One man sings something that makes the neighboring boats burst into laughter. You catch only the words jackfruit, widow, and 3 ducks, which implies either a scandal or a very weird recipe. One vendor spots you laughing and gestures for you to join in. You shake your head, bashfully. He shrugs, then sings a line that definitely includes foreigner in a canoe. The boats around him chuckle, not unkindly. You offer a theatrical bow and float onward. A woman nearby begins a slow chant, almost mournful, about a bad papaya harvest. Her voice dips and swells like waves. Others echo her with sympathetic sighs and the soft clack of bowls being stacked. It's less about the fruit and more about the feeling shared loss, even if it's seasonal. You catch a group of children in their own corner of the market, mimicking the adults. One pretends to sell onions, shouting nonsense lyrics, while another throws fake money leaves. Mostly, they collapse in giggles and paddle away, already critics of the genre. And just as you're starting to think this might be the most musical market on Earth, a boat passes with an actual drum. Not a big one, just a simple hand drum made from stretched skin and bamboo. The vendor uses it to punctuate his song, tapping a beat that seems to make nearby sellers increase their volume. It's a ripple effect. Louder calls, faster rhythms, more drama. You stop paddling. Let the river carry you through this floating amphitheater, where each ripple of water carries notes instead of noise. You realize the whole scene feels alive, not just with trade, but with voice, with story, with playful competition and neighborly showmanship. One last vendor catches your eye. She sells nothing but betel leaves and areca nuts, wrapped in small bundles tied with thread. Her chant is gentle, almost whispered. When you float closer, she stops, hands you a bundle, and smiles. You unwrap it carefully. It smells sharp, earthy, and oddly floral. You try a bite. Instant regret. Your tongue tingles. Your mouth feels like it's been scrubbed with a forest, and your gums are turning pink. She laughs not unkindly and hands you a piece of coconut to chew. The flavor fades, slowly replaced by a cooling sweetness. You nod in appreciation. She resumes her chant, now including you in a line. You don't understand the words, but the cadence feels like a farewell. You wave and drift onward. The songs grow fainter behind you, replaced once again by the gentle splash of paddles and the lazy drone of insects in the air. The musical market fades, but you can still hear the echoes, part melody, part memory, settling somewhere in the back of your mind like a tune you'll hum long after you've forgotten the lyrics. As the final notes of the musical market melt into the background, a new sound takes over the soft, repetitive clinking of metal. Not singing, not sizzling, more like the deliberate tap-tap of someone testing a scale. You round a bend and find yourself drifting into the merchant heart of the market, the domain of the rice sellers. These aren't flashy boats. They're serious, heavy, low in the water from the sheer weight of their cargo. Large woven sacks and wooden barrels brim with every imaginable type of rice, long grain, sticky, red-husked, and even a rare black variety that shimmers like beetle wings in the sun. Some boats look like they're sinking under the bounty. A man sits cross-legged atop a mountain of rice, scooping grains into smaller containers with a tin cup. He doesn't even glance at you. His focus is absolute. Nearby, a woman in a wide-brimmed hat runs her hands through a bin of rice like someone sifting treasure. The grains fall through her fingers with the soft hush of sand. You pull your canoe alongside a vendor weighing a bundle of glutinous rice. Her scale is an elegant thing, carved wood, 2 metal bowls, and a set of stone weights. She adjusts one, watches it sway, then removes a few grains with a flick that feels ceremonial. You don't question the math. Historians still argue about the symbolism of rice in Vietnam, not just as food, but as a kind of social currency. Some point to its role in imperial taxes. Others trace it through ancient rituals where rice wasn't just sustenance, it was salvation. Entire villages would pray over new harvests, thanking the earth and pleading with the sky. A lesser-known fringe fact in some floating markets: it was considered extremely unlucky to spill rice into the river, not for the waste, but because spilled grains were said to attract spirits, hungry ones, who hadn't eaten in this life or the next. You watch a child refill her family's small bin of rice from a vendor's boat. She counts out the payment with tiny shells, smooth pebbles, and something shiny that might have once been a coin. The vendor accepts them all, nods, and adjusts her hat. Trade doesn't always require currency, just mutual need and a little trust. As you drift further in, you notice how much of this part of the market runs on touch. Hands in rice, hands testing moisture, fingertips judging grain texture, heat, even scent. One woman lifts a handful to her nose, inhales deeply, then grunts disapproval. The vendor scoffs and dumps the entire batch overboard in theatrical protest. Everyone claps. You steer toward a boat selling rice in bulk by the kilo, by the bucket, by the bag. The vendor sees your interest and hands you a cup of cooked, sticky rice. Warm and plain. It's chewy, slightly sweet, and far more satisfying than it has any right to be. She tells you it's nep kai hoa vang, the golden flour rice used in traditional cakes and ceremonies. You nod, mouth full. Nearby, another merchant arranges ban tate rice cakes wrapped in banana leaves, stuffed with mung bean and pork. She slices one open, revealing a neat spiral inside, and offers you a piece. The layers are tender and flavorful, like biting into history wrapped in a leaf. Then you spot the collector. An old man, weathered and calm, rowing slowly between the rice boats. He doesn't sell. He doesn't shout. He collects broken grains, the bits that spill, the crumbs swept off scales. He gathers them into a small sack with reverence. You ask why? He says, to feed the ghosts. He's not joking. In this region, it's whispered that market ghosts, spirits of old vendors, drowned traders, or simply those who died with hunger in their bones, drift through the stalls invisible, craving what they never had. The broken rice. It's their offering, their share, a way of keeping balance. You feel a shiver, but it's not from fear. It's from the quiet respect. The way life and death mingle here, not as opposites, but as neighbors sharing the same riverbank. A boat to your left sells only rice flour white. Fine, stacked in cloth sacks. The vendor sneezes as she sifts it, sending a powdery puff into the air. Children run past her boat, giggling, leaving footprints behind on the fine dust that settles across the wood. It looks like snow on the tropics. You reach a boat where rice husks are burned for charcoal. The vendor sells blackened bricks used for stoves. He hands you a piece. It's warm, light, and smells faintly of campfire. He shrugs, says it used to be food. Now it's fuel. Nothing goes to waste. The sun is high again, casting sharp reflections off the rice heaps. The white grains gleam like tiny mirrors. You have to squint to see, and even then, it all blurs together into a blinding shimmer. You take a moment to rest your paddle across your lap, letting the current tug you gently along. The rice merchants fade behind you, their boats still weighed down with their quiet wealth. You leave them like a whisper grains of memory trailing in your wake. And as you drift forward, you hear the softest clink of another scale being reset. Someone, somewhere, is measuring just enough. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to float by. The rhythm of the rice market lingers in your ears as you continue downriver, but soon it's replaced by a different kind of hum, a subtle crackling, a low flicker, and the unmistakable smell of hot oil and wax. You're entering one of the oldest and most precarious parts of the market, the floating candle and lantern vendors. Yes, fire, on water. You approach cautiously. Boats here are shaded under patched canopies, their decks crowded with trays of beeswax candles, clay oil lamps, and curious little bowls filled with floating wicks. It feels like a miracle that none of this has gone up in smoke, yet the vendors move with confidence, casually lighting, extinguishing, and relighting with long-handled tools as they go. A woman sitting cross-legged on a plank waves you over with the end of a still-smoking taper. Her boat is lined with shelves' tiny wooden altars, really displaying candles in shapes you've never seen before: dragons, lotus blossoms, turtles, even what appears to be a phoenix mid-flap. She gestures toward a small dish with 3 wicks burning in a triangle. For protection, she says softly, as though explaining to a child. You lean in to smell one. It's warm, floral, a little sticky. The scent is a mix of jasmine, incense ash, and honey. Not unpleasant, definitely ancient. Historians still argue about the origins of these market-based fire sellers. Some say they evolved from temple artisans, forbidden from selling on sacred ground, and so pushed to the river. Others claim fire and water were never separate in Vietnamese spiritual belief, both essential, both sacred, both fickle. Whatever the truth, the result is this: a cluster of boats full of flammable beauty floating on liquid uncertainty. A fringe tradition on certain market days tied to lunar events. Vendors would send candle-lit bowls downriver as offerings. The farther the flame traveled before extinguishing, the better the omen. Some claimed it could predict childbirth. Others just wanted their debt forgiven. You pause beside a vendor selling oil peanut, sesame, coconut, all housed in reused glass bottles of various shapes. He offers you a tiny clay lamp with a thin wick already soaked in sesame oil. Try, he says. You light it. It flares, settles into a soft glow, and miraculously does not tip or explode. He nods with pride, then offers a second lamp, this one for floating, good for home, he says, or ghosts. You decide not to ask which one he meant. Across the water, a younger vendor is carving new candle molds from clay, pressing designs with wooden stamps, rosettes, waves, birds. She shapes wax into small cubes, dipping them in colored dye and setting them out to dry on trays that shimmer in the sun. A rooster stands watch beside her like a lumpy security guard. There's a quiet reverence here, a sense that fire isn't just a product. It's a presence. Each boat feels like a tiny shrine. The vendors don't shout, they murmur, they offer, they explain only if you ask. Otherwise, you're just meant to feel it. A boy with soot-streaked cheeks is tending a charcoal burner at the back of his mother's boat, heating metal ladles used for pouring wax into molds. He moves carefully, despite the narrow deck and rocking floor. One wrong step, and the whole operation could end in flames and a splash. But he's steady, trained. You spot a vendor mixing herbs into her candle wax, tiny flecks of lemongrass, crushed cinnamon, even slivers of garlic. You ask why. For the mosquitoes, she says. And the men? She laughs. And so does the woman in the next boat. You realize some of these candles aren't just for lighting, they're for messaging. There's one shaped like two birds kissing, another shaped like a man kneeling before a woman holding a rice bowl. You're witnessing the floating version of romantic emojis. Subtle, flammable, very effective. You pass a quiet boat where an elderly man is pouring wax into paper molds shaped like leaves. He doesn't speak, just works, slowly, methodically. His hands tremble, but his pour never spills. Around him, the scent of burning sandalwood drifts lazily in the air. You suspect he's been doing this longer than anyone else on the river? Then, unexpectedly, a gust of wind. A flame leaps sideways, catches on a stray cloth, and is immediately extinguished by a slap of someone's paddle. No panic, no rush. Just reflexes honed by a lifetime of dancing with danger. You begin to understand the magic here. Fire on water is not impossible. It just requires respect. And maybe a splash bucket nearby. At the far edge of the lantern zone, a vendor is stringing together long chains of paper stars dipped in wax. She lights one end and lets them float behind her boat like the tail of a comet. Children nearby squeal in delight. One throws a flower into the water, and for a moment, the river becomes a constellation. You pause to buy a small floating candle shaped like a boat. The vendor hands it to you with both hands, whispering something that sounds like a wish. You set it into the river. Watch the flame flicker and feel, just for a second, as though you've sent part of yourself downstream. The candle bobs, glides, winks in the sun, then disappears behind another boat, out of sight. You let the silence settle in, a soft, smoky, golden silence that stays with you long after the fire is gone. The scent of wax and ash fades behind you as your canoe glides back into sunlight, your hands sticky from candle soot, your thoughts drifting like the little flame you sent downstream. The river opens wide again, and with it comes a new kind of whisper. Furtive voices, boats tucked deeper into shadow, and sellers who don't shout but beckon with barely a nod. You've stumbled into the unofficial side of the floating market, the smugglers, the whisper sellers, the gray zone merchants who thrive on shadows and loopholes. They're not selling fruit or fish. They're selling possibility. It starts subtly. A boat passes by with smoked fish, stacked and tied with raffia string. It looks normal until you notice the false bottom beneath the crates. A woman lifts one just enough to reveal something else. Tiny glass vials filled with a thick, tar-like substance. You paddle closer. She holds one up. Opium. No label. No explanation. Just a flick of her eyebrows and a quick movement of her hand to hide it again. You paddle past, slowly. Historians still argue how widespread smuggling was in floating markets. Some believe it was the norm, not the exception, especially in times of colonial rule or heavy taxation. Others insist these were isolated incidents, not systemic. But when half the economy floats and disappears at will, documentation is slippery. A fringe tale still told in river towns that certain smuggling families trained cormorants not to fish, but to carry small bundles of forbidden goods hidden in their feathers. A wild claim, perhaps, but you start to glance more suspiciously at every bird you see paddling by. The boats here speak a different language. They don't advertise, they observe. You watch as one man sells what looks like dried mushrooms until you see him switch out a bundle beneath the deck. The real goods, rare coins, smuggled from temples during the last dynasty's collapse. or so he whispers. Another boat deals in cloth plain, scratchy. Nothing fancy until you touch it. Beneath the coarse layer is silk, real silk, hidden between folds, wrapped in a layer of burlap and secrecy. The woman sees you notice and winks, pulling the fabric tight around her goods and humming a tune with no name. Then there's the trader selling old books, tattered, water-stained, written in a script that barely clings to the page. Most are harmless, folk stories, prayers, herbal remedies, but a few are wrapped in oilskin, sealed with twine, and passed only to those who know to ask. Forbidden poems, political tracts, love letters from the wrong class. You float on, trying not to look too interested. One boat carries nothing but baskets of limes. Another carries nothing but chickens. You'd think nothing of it until you notice the woman trading chickens for jade bracelets. She doesn't haggle, she just nods, a cluck for a carrot. Apparently, the limes are cover, and the chickens. Well, they may not be entirely chickens. Somewhere in this section, a boy with a gap-toothed grin paddles over with a small pouch of powders. For dreams, he says, blue dreams, red dreams, dreams with teeth. You don't ask what's in it, you just nod politely, wave him along, and watch as he disappears under a low dock like a mischievous catfish. Another vendor, older, sun-darkened, offers you a carved comb. Looks simple, wooden, used, but he holds it out like a relic and tells you it came from a court eunuch in the early Nguyen dynasty. Could be true, could be fiction, but his eyes are too serious for a joke. You hand him a coin, he gives you the comb and disappears without another word. You spot a woman selling carved amulets, each one painted with red symbols you don't recognize. She ties one to your wrist before you can protest and mutters a short phrase. To keep your mouth closed, she says, charming. You decide it's time to move along. At the edge of this gray market, you spot a boat surrounded by dragonflies, tiny, shimmering creatures darting in the sun. The boat's cargo dried lotus seeds and flower tea. Innocent enough, but you hear a whispered exchange between her and a passing merchant involving quantities, drop points, and coded language. You've heard less suspicious conversations in crime novels. You paddle away, back into the sunlight, trying not to look like you've just stumbled out of a story best left untold. And yet, this part of the market has its own rhythm. Quiet, calculated, less a place for shopping, more a place for knowing who to talk to and when to look away. It's not sinister, exactly, just careful, like a shadow following the sun, always there, always just behind the light. You realize something. Drifting back toward the main flow, no market this old survives without bending. Rules are fine for the day traders, but for those who live by the river, who dream with it, hide in it, trust it. Survival means knowing which current to follow and which one to pretend you didn't notice. You leave the smugglers behind, not entirely sure what you saw or what you were supposed to forget. You drift back toward the livelier parts of the river, where sunlight glints off the water and laughter echoes freely between boats again. It's a relief after the secretive shadows of the smuggler's alley. You welcome the chaos of everyday market life. The next cluster of boats is colorful, loud, and utterly unpredictable. You've arrived at the zone of duck eggs and disputes. You know it instantly by the noise. There are arguments happening in at least 3 directions, one about prices, one about freshness, and one about whether or not a particular duck is cursed. The latter seems to be winning, judging by the crowd that's gathered. Here, the goods are simple baskets of duck eggs, both raw and cooked, some speckled, some pristine, and some wrapped in ash or clay. Vendors arrange them like precious stones, each variety laid out with pride. There are salted eggs with yolks so bright orange they glow, century eggs with their haunting greenish-black translucence, and, of course, the infamous balut, fertilized eggs, partially developed, eaten with herbs, lime, and varying levels of courage. You pause at one vendor who cracks open a salted egg for you. The yolk is oily, dense, and tastes like sunshine, butter, and the sea had a complicated baby. You nod in approval. She beams and points to another. Try this one. Duck from Vin Long. Laid during full moon. Good luck if eaten while squatting. You squat obediently. Historians still debate the cultural significance of duck eggs in river markets. Were they a delicacy? A traveler's food, a kind of edible charm. Some say they were used in matchmaking rituals. If a girl boiled an egg perfectly, she was marriage material. Others claim egg merchants had secret songs to identify their product's age without cracking them. You float past a boat where two vendors are in a heated argument over who owns a particular basket of eggs. Both claim ownership. Both have receipts, though one appears to be written in crayon. A duck nearby quacks as if to add its opinion. A small crowd watches, offering unsolicited legal advice. Someone starts a bet. A fringe tradition in certain river towns, if two vendors argued too long over an item, the solution was to break it. Literally, smash it, toss it in the river, and let the spirits decide. You're about to witness this very ritual when an old woman, clearly the market's unofficial auntie, steps in and divides the eggs evenly. The vendors grumble, but peace returns. You paddle onward, passing a boat that's less egg vendor, more egg artist. He's drawn faces on every shell, some smiling, some frowning, some looking suspiciously like other vendors. You buy one with a wide grin and a tiny straw hat. He names it for you, Egbert. Across from him, a teenage boy is selling balut to daring customers. He adds a side of herbs, salt, and tamarind sauce. You decline, citing emotional unpreparedness. He nods, understanding. A tourist-looking type in a separate canoe is less lucky. She bites in, blinks, and gives a thumbs up that is clearly a cry for help. The boy applauds. You float past another boat where ducks are quacking in their cages, blissfully unaware of the fates of their siblings. A vendor tosses feed into their pens with one hand while haggling prices with the other. A child paddles up with a handful of coins and is handed two ducklings in a straw basket. It feels both charming and slightly reckless. One boat sells nothing but clay pots of steamed egg custard. It's smooth, savory, and topped with scallions and dried shrimp. You try a spoonful. It's like eating a warm breeze and a soft sigh at the same time. You thank the vendor, who waves you off and warns eat it before it cools, or it becomes philosophical. You're not sure what that means, but you eat fast just in case. As you move forward, the market continues to swirl with energy. A group of women are laughing over a spilled basket of eggs, scooping them up with nets and shouting jokes across the boats. One throws a cracked one to a passing vendor, who catches it and pretends to faint dramatically. Applause breaks out. You feel like you've just watched an improv performance, but with poultry. A boat decorated with flowers sells egg-based offerings for river spirits, tiny omelets wrapped in banana leaves, meant to float downriver as appeasements. You buy one, place it gently in the water, and give it a nudge. It spins, slowly, then disappears under a patch of lily pads. The vendor smiles. Now the market will leave you alone, she says. You pass another vendor selling small cakes made with egg yolk and mung bean, moist, dense, slightly sweet, perfect with tea. He hands you one without a word. It crumbles delicately in your mouth. For a moment, all the noise fades. Then someone shouts, "That's my duck," and chaos resumes. As the commotion grows behind you, you paddle out into a quieter stretch, your canoe heavy with the smells of salt and yolk and fried garlic. The wind picks up, ruffling your hat and sending ripples across the river. You lean back, let the sun warm your shoulders, and smile. Eggs, it turns out, are more dramatic than expected. As the egg-fueled chaos fades behind you, replaced by the softer lap of oars and murmuring voices. You enter a calmer, greener stretch of the market. Here, the mood changes. Gone is the clatter, the shouting, the flurry of bargains. Instead, you find something gentler. Soft piles of fruit, woven trays, and a series of quiet thumps from people politely losing the battle against overly juicy tropical produce. Welcome to the realm of papaya, pomelo, and sticky things. It's more like a picnic than a market. Boats are nestled close together, shaded by makeshift umbrellas made from banana leaves or faded parasols. Women sit cross-legged, slowly peeling pomelos in long, spiral strips, revealing bright, fragrant citrus beads underneath. Children nap in the shade of tarps strung across their families' boats, their hands still sticky from mangoes or rice cakes. You steer close to a vendor carving a papaya. She doesn't use a knife like a cook. She uses it like a sculptor. With a few flicks of the wrist, she reveals intricate floral designs in the flesh. You buy one simply for the artistry, then realize you've bought yourself a whole papaya. No plate, no fork, just your hands and the laws of physics. The first bite is incredible cool, sweet, musky, but by the second, you're in trouble. The juice is everywhere. Your arms, your shirt, your canoe. The vendor sees your plight and laughs, handing you a folded banana leaf with practiced grace. It works better than any napkin you've ever used. A nearby boat sells only sticky rice sweets, xoay gak, dyed red with spiky fruit, soy jiao san with mung bean paste, and soy la dua, tinted green with pandan. Each comes wrapped in leaves and tied with strips of river grass. You pick one at random. It's warm, glutinous, sweet, and disappears in 3 bites. Historians still argue whether the floating markets inspired Vietnam's diverse dessert traditions or simply gave them a stage. Some say the markets were where recipes evolved, tweaked daily based on what fruit ripened or what herb washed up in the morning flood. Others insist the sweets came first, and the market merely kept them moving, trading them like edible gossip. You stop beside a boat stacked with pomelos, grapefruit's sweeter, less bitter cousin. A woman slices one open and hands you a handful of the jewel-like pulp. It bursts in your mouth like citrus caviar. She says, if you eat enough, your skin will glow like moonlight. You nod politely while juice trickles down your chin again. A fringe superstition whispers that throwing a pomelo rind into the river while saying a person's name will cause them to dream of you. The more fragrant the rind, the clearer the dream. You consider testing this theory, but decide against meddling with ghost flirtation. The boat next to hers is full of tropical jellies, coconut, agar, dragon fruit, and little tins of sugar syrup for drizzling. A girl with 2 big sandals sits at the edge of the boat, swinging her legs and offering samples. You accept a square of rainbow jelly. It wiggles in your fingers, then melts on your tongue in a symphony of sweetness and mild confusion. Further along, a man sells jackfruit by the chunk. He cuts open a massive pod, revealing golden bulbs nestled among sticky white fibers that cling to everything: hands, faces, existential hope. He offers you one with a warning: do not touch your hair afterward. You eat it anyway. It tastes like banana, pineapple, and something floral like a fruit trying to be perfume. And yes, your fingers are now bonded with jackfruit glue. Forever. A little boy paddles by with a basket full of Che sweet soups served in plastic cups. He has taro, mung bean, long gone fruit, and one with black grass jelly that looks like it belongs in a potion shop. You take the purple one. It's cold, thick, and somehow manages to be both refreshing and deeply sticky. One older vendor sees your struggle with the jackfruit and hands you a slice of green mango with chili salt. Cleanser, she says. It's crisp, sharp, and makes your lips tingle. Somehow, it resets your taste buds. You nod in gratitude. She adds, also good for heartbreak. You chew thoughtfully. You pause at a boat where two girls are wrapping banana leaf packets and tying them with red thread. They tell you it's ban-eat sticky rice dumplings with sweetened mung bean inside. You take one and unwrap it carefully. The rice is soft and slightly oily. The filling is sweet and earthy. It feels like food meant to be eaten under moonlight. One woman sells nothing but banana-based desserts grilled, boiled, steamed, and mashed. You try a skewer of caramelized banana, crisped on the outside and gooey in the middle, topped with coconut cream and sesame seeds. You consider buying 10 more, but remember your canoe is already a sticky, sugary crime scene. As you slowly paddle forward, a breeze picks up. Petals from a nearby blossom fall into the water. The sun glows through them like stained glass. Everything smells like palm sugar and ripe fruit. You pause one last time to watch a girl stringing together long strands of rambutan husks, tying them to float behind her boat like a fruity comet tail. When you ask why, she shrugs. For fun, she says, and to make other boats jealous. You smile, lean back, and let your boat drift slowly onward, dripping with fruit juice and peace. By now, your canoe feels less like a vessel and more like a sticky lounge chair coated in mango pulp, rice starch, and the distant memory of jackfruit glue. But you're content, sun-warmed, well-fed, and drifting toward the next layer of life in the floating market. And what a curious layer it is. You begin to hear voices again, but these aren't ordinary conversations. They rise and fall like melodies, calls, and responses, high notes and hollers. Then you realize it's not random chatter. It's bargaining, musical bargaining. You've arrived at the zone where transactions are an art form. Here, buying a coconut isn't as simple as naming a price. It's a performance. A woman leans off her boat, singing her offer in a lilting tone that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. The buyer, an older man in another boat, responds with his own tune, lower, rhythmic, half flirt and half math. The melody rises. He tosses a coin. She tosses the coconut. Everyone applauds. Welcome to the river's most underrated concert series. You paddle deeper into this floating chorus of commerce. The boats are arranged like musicians in an orchestra. No conductor, but everyone somehow in tune. A vendor selling coconuts sings a verse that rhymes 8, great, and don't be late. Her neighbor answers with a pun about shrimp paste and disgrace. It shouldn't work, but it does. You pass a boat with a man selling onions and garlic, chanting the names like ingredients in a spell. Each time he adds hot pepper, the crowd cheers. He's clearly a local favorite. His voice is raspy, like a stone being rolled in a metal bowl, but the cadence is mesmerizing. Historians still debate the origins of this rhythmic commerce. Some believe it grew out of agricultural field songs, tunes sung during harvests to keep laborers working in time. Others suggest it was a way to stand out in a noisy market before microphones existed. A few even say it was used to attract distant spirits who favored harmony over haggling. One fringe theory holds that certain melodies were cursed, that if you sang them with a price too low, your boat would spring a leak, not immediately, not dramatically, just enough to ruin a morning's trade and demand a humbler tune next time. You drift near a duet between two rival vendors, both selling sugarcane. One belts out his price in a booming baritone, while the other responds in a sly falsetto that implies his sugarcane is sweeter and knows your secrets. They exchange rhymed insults while chopping samples and handing them to passers-by. You accept a piece from each. They're identical, but you nod solemnly at both, feigning wisdom. Next to them, a trio of teenagers in matching straw hats try their hand at musical salesmanship. Their melody is off, their rhythm questionable, but their enthusiasm is undeniable. A passing auntie claps offbeat just to confuse them. They laugh, and one accidentally tosses a bunch of green onions into the river. A duck claims them. End of song. You move on, past a cluster of boats selling spices. The vendor here doesn't sing. He whistles. Every note corresponds to a different spice. 3 short bursts for chili, a low trill for coriander, a shrill peep for cinnamon bark. You try to whistle back. He stops, smiles, and hands you a star anise like you've passed a secret test. One woman sells only pickled goods, green mangoes, garlic, and tiny eggplants floating in jars. Her sales pitch is a soft chant, more prayer than song, and every third verse ends with "try one." You do, it's sour, salty, crunchy, and absolutely inappropriate for polite company. Your mouth puckers into next week. Some vendors slap the sides of their boats rhythmically, turning the hollow wood into drums. One plays a whole rhythm section with 2 coconuts and a spoon. He's selling nothing, just performing. You give him a coin anyway. You reach a boat where the vendor sings about each item before she sells it. Tamarind sweet for your dreams, a root to cure your husband's schemes. You buy the tamarind, just in case. Then there's the tomato man. He doesn't sing at all. Instead, he uses a tiny wooden flute to play haunting little songs as he tosses tomatoes to buyers like juggling balls. You catch one midair. It's overripe and bruises in your hand, but the music made it worth it. He gives you a wink and plays a descending trill as you paddle away. A few boats down, you hear the oldest melody on the river, a grandmother's voice, cracked with age but strong in tone, offering pickled mustard greens and rice porridge. She sings no rhymes, no jokes, just the item, the price, and a short line about weather. Everyone listens. No one interrupts. You nod as you pass. She nods back. Even kids get in on the act. You pass a pair of siblings trying to sing their prices in harmony. It works until one forgets the words, and they devolve into laughter and shouting. Their mother claps sarcastically, hands you a bundle of lemongrass, and mutters something that feels suspiciously like "please take them with you." You laugh, paddle onward, and let the echoes of the floating chorus fade into the mist behind you. And just like that, the market shifts again, less melody now, more mutter. The music turns to memory, like a song that stays with you long after the concert ends. You hum a bit to yourself, not sure if you're echoing an old sales pitch or inventing a new one. Either way, the rhythm stays with you. The melody of the bargaining zone fades behind you, replaced by a softer, steadier sound, wood against wood. The faint creak of rope, the occasional thunk of something heavy being dropped with just enough care to suggest someone didn't pay full price. You've drifted into the practical, measured world of the rice merchants' cousins, the tool and scale vendors. Here, everything is heavier, more deliberate, less flashy, more functional. You pass boats with neat stacks of weighing stones, balance scales with polished brass arms, and bundles of measuring cords coiled like river snakes. The buyers here don't haggle loudly. They squint, they nod, they test. You pull up beside a boat where a man is arranging a display of scales like a jeweler laying out diamonds. Each is calibrated carefully, some old and wooden, others newer, made of hammered tin. He invites you to lift one. You do. It's heavier than expected, worn smooth from years of use. He says it's from his grandfather's boat. Still honest, even if your customers aren't. Historians still argue how early floating vendors measured trade, especially when money wasn't always part of the equation. Some believe measuring cords were passed down through families, cut from sacred cloth and knotted at precise intervals. Others insist the scales themselves were consecrated, treated as near-religious objects, protected from tampering with charms and stern glares. A fringe belief from certain riverside villages claimed that if a scale was out of balance, it wasn't the merchant's fault, it was the river's spirit rejecting the trade. The solution: let the scale soak in the water overnight. If it sank evenly, it had been forgiven. If not, well, better learn to carve coconuts. You pass a vendor with a boat full of nothing but weights, small ones, large ones, some shaped like coins, some like animals. A pair of cat-shaped counterweights catch your eye. The vendor smiles, used for selling noodles. Noodles love cats. You decide not to investigate that logic. Farther along, you spot a woman hammering small metal rods into shape, occasionally dipping them into a pot of oil. She sharpens knives, axes, and strange little scoops you assume are for fish, or possibly fortune-telling. You hand her your dull fruit knife from earlier. She doesn't ask what happened, just nods, sharpens it with practiced hands, and returns it wrapped in banana leaf. You thank her, tip her with a sweet bun. She tucks it into her shirt pocket like a sacred offering. You drift toward a boat that deals in baskets woven by hand from river reeds and bamboo strips. They're not decorative. These are built for function. Big ones for rice, flat ones for drying fish, tapered ones for catching eels. The vendor lets you try on a head-sized version meant for carrying market goods. It fits, sort of, though you briefly resemble a vegetable with ambitions. One man nearby sells ropes, lengths of thick, sun-bleached fiber coiled into mounds. He cuts samples for customers using a blade so sharp it barely whispers through the strand. When you ask what it's used for, he says, tying things to boats, then pauses, shrugs, and adds, and sometimes people, if they owe too much, you're not sure if he's joking. You spot a vendor selling flat, round stones stacked in tiers like little temples. She explains their weights for pressing rice cakes and drying tofu. Some even double as cooking tools heated in fire and used to sear meat. You pick up one. It's warm from the sun, cool underneath, like it holds memories of 100 river meals. Further down, a vendor displays measuring cords, strings of colored beads knotted at intervals, each representing a price, a weight, a wish. One buyer ties a new knot onto his old cord, muttering a phrase as he does. For luck, he says, and to keep my scale honest. You ask if it works. He grins. I still have a boat, don't I? You pass a man repairing a broken scale. His tools are minimal, a rock, a file, a bowl of water, but his focus is monk-like. He balances the arms, resets the pegs, tests it again and again until both sides hang even as breath. It's like watching someone tune an instrument you never realized played a song. On a nearby boat, two vendors are arguing about a faulty measure. One claims it was affected by humidity. The other says his rival shaved his stones down over time to cheat customers. A third boat drifts over and offers both of them a drink. Argument over. Hydration wins. A woman with silver hair ties strings of beads to each corner of her scale. Keeps the spirits from tipping it, she explains, and reminds me which side is mine. Her smile is crooked, her eyes very sharp. You try to imagine this world without these tools, no scales, no cords, no clever tricks, just handshakes and guesses. It would work, maybe, but it wouldn't feel the same. Here, trust is measured, sometimes in grams, sometimes in glances. The tool boats begin to thin. You float past one last vendor, his boat empty save for a single massive balance scale bolted to its floor. He's polishing it quietly, as if it were a temple idol. You offer a wave. He offers a nod. No words, just the slow swing of a scale arm in the breeze. You drift onward, your canoe just slightly heavier with sharpened tools, knotted cords, and a borrowed respect for the quiet, deliberate world of those who weigh what others simply count. The clink of balance arms and the creak of measurement cords fade behind you as your canoe glides back into a brighter stretch of river. Sunlight glimmers on the surface like scattered rice grains, and the noise ahead is unmistakable. Not singing, not bartering, not even arguing. This is the crackle-pop sizzle of oil over flame. You're entering the night market's hidden twin, the floating fire zone. It's not quite dark yet, but these vendors are already preparing. Boats are outfitted with stoves, some clay, some metal, some jury-rigged from parts of bicycles and dreams. Fires flicker gently beneath woks, frying pans, and little ovens that smoke like ancient dragons. The smells hit you instantly: charred scallions, caramelized pork, banana leaf, and danger. You pass a man crouched over a clay stove, tossing flat rice cakes onto a wire grill. They bubble at the edges, puffing up like edible pillows, then crisp into a perfect golden brown crunch. He flips them with a bamboo stick and catches one mid-air, handing it to you with a practiced grin. You bite. It shatters into smoky sweetness. Somewhere inside is a sliver of dried coconut. You nod your thanks with your mouth full. He nods back without looking, already grilling the next. You drift closer to a vendor deep-frying tiny shrimp cakes. Her wok spits and hisses, sending droplets of oil skyward in tiny, suicidal arcs. She wears sleeves to her fingertips and a hat tied under her chin, the unofficial uniform of someone who's been burned before. She hands you a rice paper cone filled with shrimp, scallions, and crushed peanuts. It's crispy, salty, impossible to stop eating. Historians still argue whether these fire-bearing boats were extensions of land markets forced to adapt, or something older ritual fire carriers turned practical in a time of rising trade. There are records of fireboats used in religious processions centuries ago, repurposed later as moving kitchens. Others suggest the fire came first, and the food just followed it. A fringe belief in riverside villages held that fire on water was only safe if accompanied by a blessing. Some vendors still whisper a prayer before lighting the morning stove. Others wear charms made of flint and bone, tied to their ankles with black thread. You pass a vendor making what can only be described as an edible explosion: ban trang nuong. Rice paper grilled like a pizza and topped with egg, scallions, chili, dried shrimp, and mystery sauces. He fans the flame with a woven fan, tosses toppings with chopsticks, and folds the whole thing in half like a letter you're meant to eat. He hands it to you with tongs. You take a bite. It's crunchy, savory, chaotic, glorious, possibly illegal in some countries. You paddle past a boat where a woman is roasting bananas over coals, flipping them gently until the skins blacken and the fruit inside becomes pudding. She mashes one into sticky rice and wraps it in banana leaf, steaming the bundle over a bamboo rack. She calls it dessert for people who've worked all day. You nod solemnly. You've done your best. Another boat is dedicated entirely to tea boiling water in kettles over an open flame, brewing long strands of green leaves in heavy clay pots. The vendor hands you a tiny cup. It's grassy, slightly bitter, and exactly what your overloaded tongue needed. You exhale through your nose. The tea answers back. Suddenly, a loud whoosh. Someone's stove flares too high. A chorus of voices rises. The vendor slaps the fire down with a wet towel and grins like it happens every hour. It probably does. You pass a boat with nothing but buckets of water market fire patrol. The man there wears no shirt, a constant scowl, and carries the air of someone who puts out problems by throwing buckets at them, emotional or otherwise. A small boy paddles by with an entire tray of roasted peanuts in paper cones. He's probably 6. His marketing strategy: pointing silently and raising his eyebrows. You buy one out of admiration. He salutes you with a peanut and vanishes into the smoke. Then you reach the sugar boat. Its unmistakable smells of caramel and risk. A woman swirls melted sugar over metal rods, creating delicate lattices of candy shaped like birds, dragons, and flowers. Children crowd around her boat, each shouting a shape. She creates them in minutes, using nothing but syrup, heat, and witchcraft. You ask for a phoenix. She whistles a tune while spinning it. The result is fragile, golden, and beautiful. You don't eat it, you just hold it like a gift. A vendor nearby stirs a pot of bubbling molasses. She dips thin strips of rice paper into it, lets them dry on a rack, then rolls them with peanuts and coconut. She hands you one. It sticks to your fingers, your lips, and your conscience. You don't care. It's divine. The boats glow now not from the sun, but from the fires. Each flame reflects off the water, casting shimmering patterns on the hulls and the faces of the vendors. Shadows flicker like spirits. The scent of grilled meat, sweet taro, and roasted corn fills the air, woven with ash and dusk. And as you float through this firelit world, you realize how close everything is fire, water, sweetness, risk. These boats don't just sell food. They sell defiance, a quiet dare to make something beautiful over open flame, in the middle of a moving river, with a smile and a story and a splash bucket just in case. You paddle onward, full again, warmed from the inside out, not just by food, but by the people who make fire dance on water every single day. As the fire zone flickers behind you and the scent of caramelized bananas and charred rice fades from your clothes, you drift into a quieter, quirkier corner of the market. It's not organized, it's not loud, it's whimsical. The kind of place where rules bend a little and logic takes a coffee break. Welcome to the land of love charms and river curses. It begins innocently enough, a boat draped with red and pink cloth, covered in tiny bundles tied with string. A woman with 6 silver rings on each hand waves you over. She offers you a packet of dried rose petals, crushed shells, and what looks like cinnamon bark. For attraction, she says, winking, not guaranteed, but potent. You ask how it works. She shrugs. Burn it, bathe in it, leave it in someone's boat, and pretend it's a coincidence. Naturally, you pass a stall where a man sells small clay figures, some human-shaped, others animal, some that appear to be mid-transformation. He claims each one carries a different spell. He hands you a tiny figure with fish fins and a human smile. This one makes people forgive you faster. You don't ask what it's made of, you simply nod and paddle on. Historians still debate the role of folk magic in river trade. Some argue that charms and spells were part of the bartering system, a talisman exchanged like currency. Others suggest the market's mysticism evolved alongside trade, used as emotional insurance. You buy a sour fish. You also buy a charm to keep your mother-in-law from noticing. A fringe ritual still whispered among the oldest vendors. If you say your enemy's name while placing a small stone wrapped in banana leaf beneath their boat, they'll experience mild misfortune for 3 market days. No one defines mild. No one admits to doing it. Everyone suspects everyone else. You float by a vendor selling bottles filled with cloudy liquid and flower petals. Love water, she calls. Also good for rash. You pass, politely. A girl a few boats over is selling tiny scrolls tied with gold thread. You ask what they are. Prayers, she says, or maybe poems, depends on how desperate you are. One boat sells nothing but mirrors, small, oval, slightly tarnished, to reflect curses, the vendor says, or to look good when bargaining. She hands you one to try. You peer in. Somehow you look more honest than usual, suspicious. You pass a woman offering readings. She has a bowl of river water and a few petals floating inside. She watches how they spin, nods solemnly, then says, "You're traveling, but not moving. That'll change." You ask if it's a prediction. It's a suggestion. She says. A little farther on, a man sells knots. Literally, just knotted cords in different colors. Each knot is a wish. He explains. You tie it. You forget it. The river remembers. You buy one. He ties it to your wrist. Now you owe it something, he adds with a grin that is either playful or ominous. One vendor displays wooden spoons carved with symbols. She claims they stir truth into whatever they touch. You take one and stir the tea offered by the vendor next door. It immediately tastes less sweet. You hand the spoon back. She nods like she expected that. A boy paddles by holding a bundle of feathers. Luck for boats, he says. No refunds. You buy one, tuck it behind your ear, and try not to think about whether it came from a chicken or something more. Persuasive? You spot a woman wrapping something in lotus leaves. She tells you it's a never-unwrapped charm. You ask what it does. Depends who opens it, she says. So, don't. She sells 5 of them while you watch. And then there's the duck. Not a roasted duck, not a caged duck, a free duck, paddling a little too confidently near a boat selling old coins and hairpins. The vendor nods at it. That's Mrs. Leon, she says. She was a very nosy vendor. Got cursed. Now she collects gossip instead of money. The duck quacks, as if in agreement. A group of teenagers pass, each wearing paper charms pinned to their clothes. One says, "Protect me from heartbreak." Another says, "Protect my exam scores." And a third just reads, "Mosquitoes fear me." You buy one of each, for safety. You spot a final vendor, tucked into the crook of a banyan branch dipping into the river. She doesn't speak. She just hands you a smooth stone and points to the water. You toss it in. No splash, no ripple, just silence. Somehow, peaceful. As you paddle away, the market around you shifts again, less magic, more mundane, but the feeling stays. The idea that a little belief, a little superstition, a little hope stitched into banana leaf and string could float with you down the river and change something. You reach up, touch the knot on your wrist. Still tied. Still waiting. The river widens again. The air grows thicker, and the hum of trade fades to something softer, just the splash of paddles, the chirp of insects, and the gentle rustle of palm leaves bending overhead. You squint into the sun. Something glints, then blinks, then hisses. You've arrived at the edge of the market. Not its end, just the part where it stops being strictly human. Welcome to the territory of mosquitoes, mats, and sleepless vendors. You feel them before you see them. The mosquitoes, that is, they arrive in a swarm-light, persistent, and utterly convinced you're a buffet. You swat half-heartedly, but it's no use. The boats here have adapted. Every vendor you pass is wrapped in netting, swatting automatically, or covered in a mix of herbal oil and resignation. You pause at a boat selling woven mats piled high in patterns of red, green, and blue. The vendor is lying on one, completely horizontal, fanning herself with a bundle of lemongrass and muttering something that may be a lullaby or a curse. No sleep. She groans. 4 markets in 5 days. She waves vaguely toward her mosquito net. Didn't help. You offer her a coin. She doesn't even look, just tosses you a rolled mat. You'll need it, she says. Your neck will betray you before noon. You thank her, stretch the mat across your lap, and immediately feel 5% more civilized. Historians still argue about the logistics of sleep in floating markets. Did vendors rest in shifts? Did they anchor and nap? Were hammocks ever practical? One camp insists the night markets ran on strong tea and social pressure. Another believes vendors operated on naps snatched mid-transaction, balanced delicately between fatigue and the scent of fried tofu. You pass a vendor selling insect repellents, tiny jars of homemade balm, incense coils, and bundles of dried mint and basil. She holds one out, guaranteed to repel everything except regret. You buy it instantly. It smells like a garden after a lightning strike. A fringe belief passed between generations: if you slap a mosquito on the first bite of the day, you'll be bitten 7 more times. But if you let the first one land and whisper "Chin moi" before gently shooing it away, the rest will show mercy. You try it. The mosquito ignores your politeness. Rude. You paddle onward, eyes heavy, and spot a boat that's clearly a nap station. Vendors docked beside it are taking turns resting heads down on piles of banana leaves, legs draped over rice sacks, mouths open in dreams you can only guess at. The nap boat owner pours tea, watches the sleepers like a librarian guarding fragile manuscripts. Another boat sells pillows tiny, square, stuffed with straw and rice husks. You buy one. The vendor nods approvingly and whispers, "Put it under your back when you sit. It remembers your spine." You do. She's right. A man nearby sells fans, folding ones, woven ones, even a giant palm frond affixed to a stick. You take one. The breeze is minor, but the illusion of relief is real. He offers you a second one and says, "In case the first gets stolen by the wind." You laugh, then you feel a tug. It's a cat. More accurately, it's a very determined, very chubby boat cat trying to climb into your canoe. You let it. It flops down across your legs like it owns you. Its tail swishes slowly, batting at mosquitoes with perfect timing. A vendor nearby grins. That's Tiger. He sleeps in 5 boats a day, pays rent in fleas. You don't mind. You're warmer. You're sleepier. Tiger begins to purr, loudly. You pass a boat where a vendor is brewing a bitter black tea in silence. His eyes are bloodshot. He offers you a cup without speaking. It tastes like dirt and secrets. He nods once, then pours another for himself and stares at the river like it personally owes him money. On another boat, a woman is dozing upright, perfectly balanced between baskets of yams and onions. You marvel at her posture. You paddle closer. She's tied her ankle to the boat with string, just in case. Genius. Nearby, a man tries to sell hammocks made of old rice sacks. You ask how strong they are. He points to his grandmother sleeping in one nearby. It sways gently in the breeze. She snores like thunder. You buy 2. You drift into a boat that appears to sell nothing. The woman aboard simply smiles and says, "Rest here." So you do. No questions, no transactions. Just 5 minutes of leaning back, fan in hand, cat on lap, while the world hums quietly around you. A breeze lifts the edge of your mat. Tiger flicks his ear, but doesn't move. The river carries you forward. You blink once, twice. The sun glints off the water in slow, gold ripples. Your mind slows. Breath evens out. The itch of mosquito bites fades beneath the weight of slow motion. And then, just as you're about to nod off completely, someone calls out, "Watermelons sliced and salted." You jolt awake. Tiger leaps into another boat. The nap is over. The market resumes. Tiger has abandoned you. Your mat is damp from watermelon juice you didn't actually eat, and the sun has crept just a little too high overhead. But the river doesn't pause. It just loops you forward into the next winding cluster of boats, where things are fluffier, furrier, and more curious than anything you've seen so far. You've entered the strange, endearing chaos of feral cats and boat dogs. At first, it's just one, a ginger cat sprawled on a stack of cassava roots, tail twitching in perfect rhythm with the boat's gentle rock. Then you see another sleek, black, and glaring at passers-by from under a crate of green beans. Then another, gray and dozing in a pile of rattan baskets like a merchant who gave up halfway through her shift. They're not pets, exactly. They're more like coworkers, supervisors, freelance moral support. You steer carefully. A boat dog barks from the deck of a noodle vendor, then goes back to gnawing on a coconut shell like it's plotting a memoir. Its ears perk at every splash, as if in charge of security, though it clearly naps through most emergencies. Historians have no consensus on when animals became fixtures of the floating market. Some believe cats were first brought to guard rice from rats and fish from opportunistic paws. Others argue dogs led the way, companions to long-haul boat families who slept better with a snoring furball nearby. What they do agree on somewhere along the way, the animals stopped being helpers and became something closer to colleagues. One fringe tale claims a particularly wise tabby once determined fair prices by pawing at the correct weight scale until a rival vendor tried to bribe it with salted fish, and the whole barter system collapsed into scandal. True or not, You now see at least 3 vendors consulting their animals before sealing a deal. You pull alongside a boat where a family of kittens nests in a shallow basket, bundled in old scarves. The vendor, a man selling starfruit and pineapples, waves you off gently. "They're only 3 weeks," he says, "not for trade, for morale." One kitten stretches, yawns, and falls off the basket in slow motion. No one reacts. You drift past another boat where a golden retriever lounges belly up across 2 crates of tamarind. Its owner carefully lifts one paw to check ripeness, then laughs to herself. She scratches behind its ear, mutters something about good luck, and drops a handful of samples into a customer's lap. The dog, meanwhile, snores. You watch a cat leap from one moving boat to another, landing perfectly on the edge of a produce scale. The vendor swats at it with a dish towel. He only lands when someone's lying. She jokes. The customer adjusts his price. There's a woman selling grilled meat skewers, each one arranged around a central pole where a parrot is perched. The bird shouts prices, slogans, and at one point, what sounds suspiciously like someone's tax information. You ask? She shrugs. He listens? He remembers? Don't talk near him unless you're honest. You pass a man selling dried anchovies. His dog eyes every customer suspiciously. One reaches too quickly and the dog growls. The vendor stops. "Try again," he says. Slower. With respect. You try it. No growl. Transaction complete. A child with a slingshot guards a boat filled with taro roots and half a dozen cats. "Don't touch them," she warns. "They choose you." One cat immediately climbs into your boat. It's muddy. It needs your new hammock. You accept your fate. Some boats clearly specialize in pets. A vendor offers woven collars, tiny bells, and even waterproof coats made from banana leaves. "For cats who hate rain but love drama," she says. You buy one, unsure who it's for. You spot a dog sitting proudly at the prow of a boat selling incense. It looks like it's meditating. A group of children paddle by and bow to it as they pass. The vendor doesn't correct them. One vendor sells nothing but fish paste and scratch poles. She explains, "Some cats like drama, some like hobbies." You nod, fully convinced this is ancient wisdom. You notice a small shrine nestled into a crate of garlic photos of 3 cats, 2 dogs, and a chicken. Offerings of rice, meat scraps, and a burned stick of incense sit beside it. The vendor touches the shrine before each sale. You do the same, just in case. A nearby man is brushing a cat with a fishbone comb. The cat purrs like an engine. He offers to brush you too for luck. He says, you decline. He shrugs, "Suit yourself." It worked for this guy, gesturing to the cat, who does look oddly smug. The animals aren't just lounging, they're part of the flow. They nap during lulls, leap aboard curious customers' canoes, curl up beside hot stoves for warmth. They know the rhythm of the river better than most. You start to wonder if the market would even function without them. You pass a dog paddling a small raft with its paws. It's not clear where it's going, but it looks very determined. You don't interrupt. As you leave the furred and feathered quarter, your canoe now sporting at least 3 paw prints and an unsettling amount of fur, you look back once. A calico cat watches you from a sack of flour, blinking slowly as if to say yes, you've been judged. You nod. You've passed. The cats fade behind you along with the judgmental stares. The dog snores, and that one parrot who probably knows your credit history, and now the river widens into something more chaotic. Boats are tilted at odd angles. Mats are strung between hulls. Everything feels damp and a little slanted. Welcome to monsoons and mudslides, the seasonal messiness the market wears like a badge of honor. The rain hasn't started yet, but you can feel it in the air heavy, humid, like the river is holding its breath. Vendors are preparing. Tarps are being unfurled like sails. Buckets are stacked in corners. Boats are being tied tighter than usual. Some doubled up, some weighed down with rocks. This isn't panic, it's routine. You paddle slowly through the flood readiness zone. A woman selling ginger is balancing a basket on her knees while reinforcing her roof with palm leaves. She sees you watching and mutters. Last year, I lost 10 kilos of turmeric and my uncle. She's not joking about the turmeric, at least. Historians still argue how floating markets adapted so well to Vietnam's long, moody monsoon seasons. Some say it's the architecture of necessity when the roads vanish. The river becomes the only way to move, eat, survive. Others claim it's muscle memory, entire generations raised to float before they walk. You pass a vendor selling waterproof sacks, not fancy plastic woven reeds coated in wax and tree resin. She holds one up, slaps it against her boat with a thunk, and says, "This kept my noodle cart afloat during the '97 mudslide." You nod, buy one, and wonder what your laptop would smell like if it lived in there. A fringe tradition says that if your boat survives 3 monsoons without capsizing, you can name it after your grandmother and paint a fish on the side. You spot at least 4 Ba and Go-ai boats as you float by, each with a red or silver fish painted under the oars. One man sells nothing but sandbags. He scoops the riverbank into small pouches and ties them with shoelaces. For balance, he explains, for ballast, for bargaining chips, if your eggs are wet and your pride's too dry. You float past a boat with a warped plank sign, "We fix leaks and marriages." Beneath it, a wiry old man tars a hull with methodical swipes, each stroke punctuated by swigs from a bottle of what looks like vinegar but smells like trouble. He waves you closer, points at a crack in your canoe you didn't know existed, then slaps a patch over it and calls it even. You don't argue. There's a boat selling nothing but ponchos patchworked together from old rice sacks and plastic feed bags. One has a slogan printed across it, "Better wet than washed away." You buy it. The vendor throws in a hat with flaps. "You'll thank me when the frogs start falling," she says. Farther in, a group of women are busy lashing their boats together side by side in a long row. "Floating island," one explains. "If it floods tonight, we sleep as one." They've done it before. Each boat has a cooking pot, a woven roof, and one very soggy-looking dog. You admire their coordination. It's part engineering, part neighborliness, part defiance. A few boats sell sandpaper and lacquer repair materials for when the flood ends and everything has to be polished again. One woman leans over a bowl of resin, smoothing her paddle until it shines like rain itself. "We clean after. We always clean after," she says with the tired certainty of someone who's mopped 3 rivers in her lifetime. Suddenly, thunder rumbles not overhead, but far off, like a reminder. The air cools slightly. Vendors glance upward. A man selling taro roots ties a rope around his waist and fastens the other end to a post. You ask if it's for safety. He says, "No. It's so I don't drift into marriage by accident. I float when I panic." You believe him? Another vendor has sealed her entire boat in bamboo slats and beeswax paste. She tells you she floats better during floods than her neighbor's motorcycle. Her neighbor agrees, sullenly. Children paddle around in what can only be described as barrel boats, half-cut oil drums turned into personal ferries. One tries to race you. He wins. He throws a banana leaf in victory. You salute him with a soggy peanut. You come across a small floating shrine made of driftwood and woven mats. Inside incense, a photograph of a boat half submerged, and a note written in faded ink. "Let the water take what it will. Let it not take the tea." There are 3 cups beside it, all empty, all upright. As you drift onward, the first drops fall light, warm, barely there. They patter across the water, across your arms, across the banana leaf roof of the boat beside you. Everyone stops. No panic, just a deep breath, a shared nod. The market doesn't scatter. It tightens. Tarps are fastened, fires covered, paddles drawn in. You float among them like a guest at a secret rehearsal, everyone knowing the steps, no one needing to speak. The rain builds slowly. So does the rhythm of it on roofs, on crates, on pots. It sings a soft percussion, a lullaby for those who refuse to leave. You tuck your new poncho around your shoulders, tip your hat to the sky, and smile. Let the monsoon come. The market is ready. The monsoon has passed just a short burst, a warm sigh of sky rather than a fury, and now the river steams in its wake. You're damp, your poncho smells like fish and old rice sacks, and your hands are pruny, but the market endures, glistening with the resilience of people who've made a living in places that can vanish overnight. You drift into a tighter, tenser knot of boats. There's less singing here, less smiling. These aren't the fruit vendors or dessert sellers. This is a corner ruled by royal tax boats and bribes. You can tell by the posture, shoulders straighter, heads lower. The vendors here glance around before speaking. They count with their backs to the river. Their boats are tidy, but not too tidy. Respectable, but forgettable. They look like they want to be overlooked. You pass a boat painted in deep blue and gold, the colors worn but still visible. A man in an ornate vest stands at its prow. He doesn't call out his goods. He stares. Behind him are crates labeled with brushstrokes. No prices. This is not a seller. This is a collector. You paddle by carefully, avoiding eye contact. He doesn't speak to you. He doesn't need to. The boats around him bristle with tension. One vendor pretends to reorganize her baskets. Another suddenly becomes very interested in her own tow. A third quietly places a bundle of herbs into the blue boat and says nothing. Historians still argue how taxation functioned in floating markets. Some records show official collectors, representatives of the Nguyen court, or later colonial administrations, paddling along like floating cash registers. Others insist much of it was informal, a duck here, a bottle of fish sauce there, a whispered payment slipped between jars of chili paste. One fringe tale speaks of the phantom tax boat, a craft that appeared only during floods, demanding tribute for imaginary permits. Vendors who refused were later found floating downstream, fully clothed, mysteriously unharmed, and completely ignored by the market for 3 days straight. You paddle onward. A vendor selling mushrooms sighs and tosses 2 jars into a passing official's boat. One for the tax, one for your daughter's wedding, she mutters. The man says nothing. The jars clink into place. Nearby, a vendor with jars of pickled bamboo hides a small pouch under her seat just before a uniformed man paddles by. He ignores her, tips his hat, and drifts off. She exhales so hard her hat falls off. Not all tax collectors are stern. You pass one who's leaning back in a boat full of chickens, laughing with a woman who's handing him a duck. "Don't forget the feathers this time," she says. He grins, nods, and jots something into a leather-bound notebook with suspiciously blank pages. One woman whispers to you as you drift by, 3 bribes this week, all eggs, no coin. They don't want coin anymore. Coin is traceable. You nod slowly, wondering how many payments you've missed just by being polite. A vendor with a dragon fruit boat waves a small red cloth as you pass, a coded signal. Within seconds, a younger man in a neutral-looking boat pulls up beside her, exchanges 2 fish and a bottle of chili sauce, and paddles away. She wipes her brow and mutters, "That's my license now." You pause at a boat selling stamps, not the mailing kind market stamps, wax seals, hand-carved from wood. The vendor explains each is a fake permit, for display, makes them hesitate before asking questions. You buy one labeled, "Approved for Floating Enterprise District 3. You're in District 5. He shrugs. Close enough. Suddenly, shouting. 2 boats over. A collector has boarded a vendor's raft and is holding up a broken scale. The vendor protests, claiming it's balanced, sacred, family heirloom. The collector drops it into the river and tosses a new one in its place, marked with a red stamp. The message is clear fare now, or fairer next time. And yet there's laughter too. A group of vendors paddle by with baskets of durians, calling out mock-official slogans in sing-song, pay in smell, pay in spikes. One of them tosses a durian toward a tax boat. It lands, cracks slightly, and releases its pungent power. The collector curses. The vendors cheer. Everyone wins, or loses. It's unclear. One man floats by with a painted duck tethered to his boat. "My tax agent," he says with a grin. He bites anyone who underpays. The duck looks innocent. You don't test it. Some boats have charms dangling from their oars, red strings, bells, even cloves of garlic, to keep greedy spirits away, one vendor explains. And greedy men who think they're spirits? You pass a final tax boat where a woman in formal robes is sipping tea under a parasol. She gestures for you to stop. You do. She stares at your peanut cone, shrugs, and says, "Payment accepted." You hand it over. She takes a bite. Carry on. You paddle away, lighter by one snack, heavier with the knowledge that even on water, bureaucracy floats. But here, unlike on land, the bribes are edible, the permits washable, and the tax code smells faintly of lemongrass. The river curves again, and with it, the mood softens. The tension of tax boats fades into the golden hush of late afternoon, where trade slows and something else begins. You catch the scent before anything else smoke, soft and fragrant, mixed with jasmine and banana leaf. And then you see them. Small, flickering flames drifting on the water. You've arrived at the spiritual heart of the market lanterns for the river gods. It begins with one boat anchored gently in the bend of the river, its hull painted with pale blue waves and faded flowers. A woman sits in the center, her hands folded in prayer. In front of her, a tray of small rice paper lanterns, some shaped like lotuses, some like birds, all cradling tiny candles glowing like fireflies. She lowers one into the water, gives it a gentle push, and watches it float away. Then another, and another. You slow your paddling, letting your canoe drift along the path of these quiet offerings. Around you, more boats begin doing the same, lowering lanterns, lighting wicks, sending wishes downriver like soft, golden punctuation marks. A man waves you over and offers you a lantern. Light it for something you've lost, he says, or for something you still hope to find. You hesitate, then light it. The flame wobbles, then steadies. You set it gently on the surface of the water and watch it sail. Historians still debate how this ritual made its way into the everyday commerce of floating markets. Some say it began as a seasonal tradition, tied to the Lunar New Year or the Mid-Autumn Festival. Others claim vendors, constantly on the move, created their own rituals to replace the temples they rarely had time to visit. A few even insist that river spirits themselves demanded it. So often were offerings made that eventually a trade was struck, lanterns for protection, light for safe passage. A fringe belief, if your lantern survives the bend in the river without tipping, your wish will reach its destination. If it tips, the spirits keep it for themselves out of curiosity or mercy. No one can say. You paddle slowly past a boat where children are folding paper into intricate flower shapes, each one designed to hold a drop of wax and a thread of wick. Their hands move expertly. A girl no older than 8 hands you a crooked one and says, "It's lucky because it's not perfect." You thank her. She nods solemnly, as if she's been doing this for centuries. Nearby, a couple lowers a shared lantern into the water, each whispering into it before letting go. The boatman watches it float, then says something about their wish being too loud he could hear it, so the gods probably did too. You pass a woman selling bundles of incense and joss sticks. She lights one, places it upright in a bundle of wet clay, and says a quiet prayer for traders lost at sea. A photo tacked to the side of her boat shows a younger man, smiling, holding a basket of fish. She doesn't explain who he is. She doesn't need to. One boat sells paper boats, literal ones, folded tightly from parchment, soaked in oil. You ask why? They burn instead of float. The vendor says, some wishes need fire more than water. Another vendor offers tiny flags to attach to your lantern, handwritten wishes, in script so small you need to squint to read them. You choose one at random. It says, "May my debt be forgiven by the wind." You nod? Feels relatable? You drift farther, the water now glowing with dozens of tiny flames. Some spin in gentle circles. Some speed forward like they're chasing something. Others float straight and steady, as if they know exactly where they're going. You pass a boat where a monk is chanting. His voice is low and steady, layered with centuries. He sells nothing, accepts nothing, just nods as you pass. You bow. He bows lower. Farther on, you spot a boat where a young boy is lighting lanterns and placing them back to back in the shape of a star. For my grandfather, he says, he used to steer this boat. Now I light it for him. He smiles, but it's quiet, earnest. One woman is fishing out a half-drowned lantern with a long reed pole. She cradles it in her palm, blows gently on the flame until it reignites, then sets it back down. Some wishes just need a second chance, she murmurs. You pass a boat selling oil in tiny ceramic jars. Better than wax, the vendor claims. Burns longer. Safer for your wish. You take one. It smells like jasmine and smoke. As the sky shifts from gold to gray, the water becomes a mirror. Lanterns float across it like stars, loosened from the heavens. The whole market seems to quiet. Vendors speak in hushed tones. Laughter becomes less sharp, and even the cats curl up tighter, sensing the solemn hush of dusk. You paddle a little slower now. The river, flickering with light, carries everything. Wishes. Losses. Small, glowing promises. And you, drifting among them. The sky is dimming now, colors fading from bright gold into the murky blue that means day is slipping off its sandals and tiptoeing into night. But the market still breathes. You paddle onward through the soft hush left by the lanterns, and soon another texture emerges rougher, chattier, filled with clinking metal and the rustle of fabric. You've entered a dense tangle of boats selling old things, odd things, foreign things, coins that don't match the local currency, fabrics stitched with scripts you can't read, bright beads, brass scales, and chipped porcelain bowls with patterns that look imported. Welcome to the zone of foreigners, odd coins, and trade tricks. A boat drifts by selling spices, its vendor wrapped in a patterned shawl not from this region. She doesn't call out her prices. Instead, she sings in a language you don't recognize, soft, syllabic, almost teasing. The scent of cinnamon and cardamom trails behind her, wrapped in the music. Another vendor waves you over. His boat is low in the water, weighed down with jars of dried herbs and bottles labeled in 3 different alphabets. Cham, he says, tapping one. Indian? He points to another. Chinese. He shrugs. All real. All probably legal. You float closer. The items look old, well-traveled, possibly cursed. One jar holds what appears to be tiny preserved limes in oil. Another, thin, folded pieces of something leathery, medicinal, he assures you, or it's paper. Hard to say. Historians still argue just how connected ancient Vietnamese river markets were to regional trade routes. Some suggest they served as informal ports, linked by invisible lines to silk roads and sandalwood loops. Others claim these were merely echoes, faint imports, trickled down from larger cities and reshaped for local tastes. What's certain is that foreign goods floated into these rivers like stories, part truth, part trickery, all profit. A fringe belief: if you accidentally trade for something forged or fake, the river won't carry your boat straight the next day. It'll spin in circles until you throw the item overboard or sing a confession loud enough to shame the wind. You pass a boat selling jewelry necklaces of coral and turquoise, rings carved from shell. The vendor insists each stone comes with a history. "This one," she says, pointing to a cracked ring, "came from a merchant who tried to sell pepper as gold. He lost a toe. The ring is cursed, but fashionable." You keep paddling. A boy nearby offers you coins. None match. Some have square holes in the center. Others are stamped with elephants, pagodas, suns, moons. One appears to be a button. He grins. "Buy 5, get 1 lucky." You buy 4 and leave before he finishes the sentence. Another vendor invites you to a guessing game: which cloth is from Laos, which from Java. You guess? She laughs. "Wrong. They're all Vietnamese, but they want to be exotic. Let them." You drift into a pocket of boats dealing in perfumed oil, incense cones, and small carved statues that appear to represent gods you can't name. A man with a long beard and suspiciously smooth hands gestures toward a bundle of cedarwood sticks. "For memory," he claims, "or maybe headaches. Possibly both." You accept one. It smells like regret and clean laundry. Farther along, you see a woman balancing a tray of tiny ceramic bowls painted with dragons and cranes. "Chinese," she says. Or, "Painted by my cousin pretending to be Chinese." You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. The cranes are accurate. A girl hands you a piece of silk so fine it catches the wind like a sigh. You ask where it's from. "My dreams," she says, "but probably Thailand." You buy it anyway. You pass a boat offering fortune dice 6-sided cubes with symbols instead of numbers. The vendor claims they come from India, or a dream, or maybe just a very bored monk. You roll one. It shows a boat, a flame, and a leaf. That means dinner is safe, but someone will lie to you. He interprets. You thank him, eat a peanut, and trust no one for 20 minutes. One vendor claims to sell real Roman spices. You ask how they arrived. He taps his temple. Inheritance? You smile, decline, and move on, passing a nearby stall where a parrot is reciting Arabic numerals while chewing on a coin. You pause at a boat draped in Persian-style cloth, rich with blues and golds. The vendor gestures to a worn rug and says, "Used to fly. Now it just sells coffee." You laugh. He hands you a tiny cup. It's thick, black, and potent enough to make your left eyebrow twitch. You realize the entire zone is less about the goods and more about the stories. Every item is a half-truth wearing perfume. It's a market of maybe, of perhaps, of don't ask too many questions. And somehow, it works. You leave with a strange coin, a new scent, and the suspicion that none of what you bought is exactly what it claimed to be. But it's real enough for now. The river accepts all kinds. The sounds shift again. The chatter of exotic trade fades behind you, replaced by the low, rhythmic slap of paddles, the clunk of wooden hulls brushing together, and something unexpected laughter, loud, unfiltered, and coming from multiple directions. You've drifted into the floating barber zone, a surreal part of the market where vanity floats right alongside vegetables. At first, you don't believe what you're seeing. A man is getting a full haircut in the middle of the river. No roof, no mirror, just a cracked wooden chair bolted to a deck and a barber with shears, one foot braced on a sack of onions, leaning in like a sculptor mid-masterpiece. A small audience of fellow vendors watches from nearby boats, offering commentary and unsolicited fashion advice. Someone shouts, "Cut the ear hair next." Another shouts, "Leave some dignity." The barber flicks his wrist dramatically and says, Style is a floating thing. You believe him. You float past a second grooming boat, this one operated by an older woman who's carefully trimming the eyebrows of a vendor while he drinks tea and stares at the horizon like he's at a spa retreat. She uses tiny gold scissors. They glint. He sips. Nobody rushes. Historians still scratch their heads over the presence of grooming stations in floating markets. Some say it was inevitable when your entire livelihood happens on water. The salon follows the customer. Others claim it started with monks offering symbolic head shavings, later co-opted by enterprising barbers who realized people will pay anything not to look like a sea crab. A fringe belief from this part of the river: if your haircut finishes before your boat drifts 3 body lengths downstream, you'll be lucky in business for 7 days. If it takes longer, you'll forget someone's name at the worst possible moment. You pass a narrow skiff with a mirror propped against a sack of limes. A man adjusts his mustache, while another behind him holds a compact hand mirror at an angle that can only be described as optimistically wrong. It's less about precision, more about ritual. One boat offers not just haircuts, but face threading, using taut strings and the kind of close-up courage that only comes from decades of threading strangers on unstable wooden decks. You watch as a woman threads her customer's cheeks while holding the string in her mouth and balancing a toddler on one hip. She doesn't flinch, neither does the toddler. A teenage girl waves you over and offers to pluck your eyebrows. You politely decline, but she's already reaching for a thread. You paddle faster. A few boats down, a man in a woven hat offers foot scrubs and ear cleaning. You raise an eyebrow. He raises a cotton swab. You politely drift away, only for someone else to shout, "He found a tiny fish in someone's ear last week." A man nearby is getting a shave with an actual straight razor. No cream, no towel, just a bowl of soapy river water and a vendor with unnerving confidence. You wince, he winks, you paddle on. Then there's the styling boat. It's decked in colorful fabric banners, its poles wrapped in bright ribbons. A sign says, "Wedding ready in 15 minutes, or your reputation back." A woman sits inside, getting her hair curled around heated clay rods, while her friend reads her fortune from a tray of spilled tea leaves. The stylist whistles and tosses a flower into her braid. You ask what they charge. The stylist shrugs. Whatever makes you feel slightly more handsome. You consider it, then float on. One man, beaming with pride, polishes his bald head with a cloth soaked in pomelo oil. "Shiny brings luck," he says. "Also keeps birds from landing." You don't ask for clarification. Further down, a boat offers temporary tattoos painted in turmeric and ash. Only last 2 weeks. The vendor says, "Longer if your soul is stubborn." You buy a small spiral on your wrist. It tingles. The vendor nods. Now you'll paddle in circles for a day. It's part of the charm. Another boat sells beard oil. Not just any beard oil, this one is infused with fish sauce. For boldness, the vendor insists, and personal space. You believe him, mostly because of how quickly people clear away after he applies it. There's a grooming competition happening on one boat. 2 barbers working side by side on twin brothers, racing to sculpt matching styles. The brothers shout feedback. The crowd shouts louder. The winning barber gets a papaya. The loser gets to eat the peel. It's unclear who wins. You spot a final boat, a quiet one, where a woman is gently braiding a child's hair. Both of them humming softly. No audience, no mirror, just care, rhythm, and the sound of water slapping wood. It feels like a lullaby, wrapped in knots. You pass by silently, not wanting to break the moment. As you drift out of the barber zone, you catch your reflection in the water hair wild, face smudged with tea stains and river dust, and a faint yellow spiral tattoo shining on your wrist. You smile. Style, like everything here, is portable, improvised, gently ridiculous. And occasionally blessed by fish? The laughter of the floating barbers fades behind you. and with it, the sounds of scissors, heckling, and fish-infused beard oils. Now, the river hushes again, not out of reverence, but concentration. You're entering a quiet, studious stretch of the market known mostly to locals, the floating fix-it zone. Here, the boats are not loud. They creak, they rattle, they smell like rust and glue and ambition. Each one is a miniature repair shop. There are no menus, no price lists, just people hunched over half-broken things with the solemn focus of monks restoring ancient scrolls. You glide past the first boat, a man seated cross-legged, carefully stitching a sandal with thread pulled from the hem of a t-shirt. His fingers move so precisely that you don't notice at first that he's blind in one eye, or maybe both. He doesn't look up. The sandal is more important. Next to him, a woman welds two cracked pots together using a coal-fired stove the size of a coffee can. Sparks snap and spit into the river. She doesn't flinch. Her boat is covered in burn marks, and you suspect each one has a story. Historians have often overlooked this part of floating markets, perhaps because it's not glamorous. But here lies the market's backbone, not the buying, but the mending. Before things were disposable, they were fixed, repaired, given new names and second lives. One fringe saying passed along boat families: the river gives only once. Everything else must be coaxed to return. Here, coaxing is an art form. You pass a boy repairing a paddle. He tests it in the water, frowns, then shaves another sliver off the blade with a knife the size of his forearm. He nods to himself, then helps his grandmother hammer a metal pot lid back into shape with a chunk of driftwood and her sandal. You don't interrupt. It's a duet. One boat has dozens of broken fans, hand fans, electric ones, even a ceiling fan somehow adapted for a floating stall. The vendor mutters to himself in rhythm as he oils hinges, rewires cords, and replaces paper blades with folded banana leaves. You feel cooler just watching. Another vendor sells nothing, just offers to sharpen knives, scissors, chisels. A mother paddles over and hands him a spoon. He sharpens it anyway. You spot a man fixing radios. He has 6 spread out before him, all half disassembled. From one of them, a voice suddenly crackles through. Cloudy skies expected this evening, before disappearing into static. He nods, satisfied. The forecast arrived. You pause at a sewing boat ribbons, thread, cloth, spilling like a tapestry into the river. A woman repairs a shirt sleeve with silk so fine you barely see the stitches. She tells you, "This belonged to my husband. Now it belongs to my son. Soon it will be part of our boat." You realize she means it literally. A vendor nearby sells thread made from old fishing nets. He offers you a spool, stronger than silk. He says, also, smells faintly of ambition and shrimp. You decline, but he throws in a patch of burlap anyway. For your dignity. Another vendor hammers nails into a crate while balancing 3 toddlers and a pan of drying chili. The crate is for someone's cat. The chili is for dinner. The toddlers, she explains, are just extra weight to keep the boat from tipping. Like sandbags, she jokes, though one of them is chewing on her hammer. A man is repairing umbrellas, wooden ones, the kind with cloth canopies and bamboo ribs. He patches one with newspaper, then oils the joints. Monsoon ready, he declares, spinning it once like a lazy ballet dancer. You almost clap. You float past a boat with broken shoes nailed to its walls like trophies. The vendor offers free fixes for sandals, but charges double for high heels. They betray people, he mutters, holding up a stiletto with the air of someone who's seen things. Then there's the glue boat. Not selling glue, making it... A man stirs a pot of gelatinous, amber-colored sludge. He adds powdered shell, resin, and something that smells alarmingly like fish. Stickier than a promise, he says, applying a dab to a cracked bowl and clamping it with 2 carved chopsticks. You ask how long it lasts. he replies. If it holds through 3 rains, it's forever. You spot a final boat at the edge, no customers, just tools. The woman aboard is carving new handles for old knives, sanding them smooth with river stone. You ask if she sells them. She shakes her head. I give them to people who need them. You ask how she decides. She just looks at your hands. You paddle on, a little slower, feeling the weight of objects made whole again. The fix-it zone hums behind you soft, steady, unglamorous, essential. Not everything here is beautiful, but everything works, or will soon. And in a world that floats, that's more than enough. You drift away from the soft rhythm of repair, the sanding, stitching, sharpening, and find yourself entering a stretch of the market that feels less like commerce and more like a floating museum of everything that almost makes sense. Welcome to the miscellaneous boats. Nobody calls it that, officially, but you can tell. These boats don't fit the neat zones of fruit, food, fish, or fortune. They sell odds and ends, bits and bobs, parts of other things. It's the land of why is this here and who would buy that. You pass a boat with hundreds of keys. Not locks, just keys. Rusted, shiny, old, new. Labeled with things like Gate 5 or Box of Regret. You ask the vendor what they unlock. She shrugs. Some unlock boats, some unlock memories, some unlock nothing at all. You buy one anyway. It feels heavy, important, completely useless. Another vendor sells spoons, just spoons. Big, small, bent, gilded, slotted. One is shaped like a fish. One has a hole in it. One has no handle. He calls it the spoon of acceptance. You pick it up. He nods approvingly. Historians rarely document this section, perhaps because it defies category. These are the catch-all corners of river trade places where lost objects gather, where necessity meets nostalgia, and where someone's trash becomes someone else's new religious relic. A fringe belief from the southern delta: when a spoon washes up on your boat, it means you're about to have unexpected company. If it's a fork, it means you'll argue with them. If it's a knife, best just stay home. You float past a boat stacked with faded posters, old films, travel ads, propaganda slogans. The vendor sells them by color scheme or mood. You want something hopeful, she asks. She hands you one of a plane that never flew. Next is a man selling glass bottles with nothing inside. Air, he says, from the old provinces, pre-flood. He sells one to a nostalgic grandmother who cradles it like a message. You ask what happens if it breaks. Then the past escapes. He replies, one woman sells buttons, huge piles of them, sorted not by size or shape, but by what she claims they remember. There's a jar for weddings, one for goodbyes, another for buttons that saw secrets. You pick one with a chip in it. That one heard gossip during a funeral. She whispers. You pocket it reverently. A child rose by offering left socks, just the left ones. No explanation. You paddle past a vendor selling broken clocks, all of them stuck at different times. He insists they still work. They tell time that already happened. He explains, very useful for remembering. One of the clocks reads 4:07. You don't know why that makes you emotional. Another boat sells wind. No, really, the vendor has bamboo fans, paper pinwheels, and jars she claims were sealed during typhoons. She opens one for you. It smells like salt and something long gone. You encounter a woman painting eyes onto river stones, so they can watch where they go. She says, you buy one. It stares into your soul. You apologize to it, just in case. A nearby boat sells sleeves. Not shirts, just sleeves. Spare emotions, the vendor calls them. For when you need to wear your heart again. You don't know if she's a poet or a prankster, but her boat smells like cinnamon and old secrets. A boy sells rubber bands. He snaps one onto your wrist without asking. Now your promises won't fall apart, he says. You nod solemnly, even though your wrist now hurts. You pass a boat that looks like a drawer exploded. Hairpins, marbles, stickers, 3 mismatched gloves, a single roller skate. The vendor's slogan, "You'll know it when you see it." You don't see it. You paddle on. One woman sells jars of mistaken identity. Each contains something that isn't quite what it looks like. A rock that's actually soap. A coin that's a seed. A pearl that rattles. You hold one. It's a promise disguised as a mistake. She offers. You buy it without hesitation. You find a vendor stacking ladders made of driftwood. None are longer than a foot. Symbolic, he says, for climbing out of emotional holes. You politely decline. He shrugs. You'll be back. A boat floats by with a mounted chalkboard reading "Lost and Found." But mostly lost, items include 1 sandal, a wedding ring, a dented can of lychee, and something that may once have been a harmonica. You don't ask questions. The last boat in this zone is empty except for a woman seated quietly with a sign that reads, "Nothing for sale. Sit if needed." You tie your canoe to hers. Sit for 5 minutes, say nothing, and feel strangely better. You leave the miscellaneous boats lighter, though your pockets are full of buttons, rocks with eyes, and a spoon that might understand you. Sometimes, what doesn't make sense ends up being what you keep. You leave the realm of strangeness behind your canoe, now quietly rattling with keys, clocks, spoons, and probably a bit of unspoken magic, and drift into a broader stretch of river where the boats seem wider, flatter, more communal. You've arrived at the floating kitchens and communal cooking zone. This isn't where food is sold for coins and smiles. This is where meals are made in bulk, in batches, in bubbling pots the size of bathtubs. Here, the market pauses its trade and turns its attention to the eternal question, have you eaten yet? The boats are moored side by side, creating a makeshift island of cooks and stoves, children peeling garlic, elders poking soup, and cousins arguing over the correct number of fish bones. The smell is rich and layered fermented shrimp paste, charcoal, lemongrass, coconut milk, and sweat. You float closer to a woman squatting beside a pot of can chua, a sour tamarind soup teeming with snakehead fish, pineapple, tomatoes, and elephant ear stem. She ladles some into a chipped bowl, hands it to a boy with a bowl-cut haircut and no shoes, then gestures for him to pass it to someone else. He doesn't run, he glides. No one here eats alone, that's the rule. A man stirs a pan of caramelized pork and egg that kotao, its dark sauce thickening in the sun, glistening with fat and patience. For the monks tomorrow, he says, and for anyone who says please today. You say please. He gives you a taste. You almost cry. Historians still argue whether these communal kitchens were born out of necessity or generosity. Some claim they evolved during floods, when cooking on land became impossible. Others say they began as a way to honor guests, travelers, or the river gods themselves. Either way, they persist floating testaments to a culture that believes food is best shared and gossip best served with soup. A fringe practice, still observed by the oldest cooks, the first spoonful of any dish is dropped into the river. For those who cannot join, they say, for those floating under. You pass a boat where 3 generations are making ban it tran sticky rice dumplings filled with mung bean, formed in perfect orbs, steamed in batches. The grandmother shapes, the daughter steams. The granddaughter delivers them to neighboring boats on a tray woven from banana leaves. No one asks, they just open their hands. Next to them, a boat is slicing jackfruit for a massive pot of che. The fruit is golden, sticky, and smells like heat wrapped in sugar. A child dips their hand in the syrup and gets swatted not too hard, then handed a bowl anyway. One woman is grilling banana leaf-wrapped parcels filled with coconut, sesame, and rice. She flips them like playing cards, each sizzle a note in a recipe sung by memory. She offers you one. It burns your fingers a little. It's perfect. You pause beside a boat filled with pots bubbling over wood fires. The cook here doesn't look up, just ladles porridge into bowls and slides them down the edge of the hull like it's a conveyor belt. You ask what it is. Rice, garlic, ginger, and patience, she says, for fevers and heartbreak. You stay for 2 bowls. A man nearby is pounding chili and salt in a stone mortar. For dipping, for reminding people that flavor needs friction. You ask if it's spicy. He hands you a slice of green mango dipped in the paste. You see stars. He laughs. Good. Now your tongue is awake. One boat is filled entirely with desserts, coconut jelly shaped like flowers, mung bean cakes stamped with patterns, and tiny cups of egg custard steaming over candle flames. The vendor hums a lullaby while arranging them. No one should fall asleep hungry, she says. Children run well, paddle errands between the boats, delivering bowls, collecting ingredients, returning spoons. One drops a bowl in the river. Everyone gasps. The boy grins, shrugs, and jumps in after it. He resurfaces, soaked and triumphant. Applause erupts. You float to a quiet corner of the floating kitchen where an old man is boiling a single pot of tea. No sugar, no milk, just green leaves, heat and time. He offers you a cup. You drink in silence. It tastes like the end of something long and kind. You notice no one here measures. No one weighs. Salt is pinched. Water is guessed. Doneness is felt in the wrist. Recipes are inherited through taste buds and muscle memory. Another cook ladles fish curry into a plastic bowl, hands it to you, and says, "Eat this so your dreams tonight are warm." You do. You know she's right. As the sun dips lower, the cooking slows. The fires are banked. The boats drift slightly apart, but remain tied by ropes, and the smell of dinner still hanging in the air. You look around at all these floating kitchens, untethered, untrained, unpretentious, and realize this is the river's real miracle. It's not just that people float. It's that they float together. As dusk deepens and the last flickers of the cooking fires die into coal-colored glow, your canoe drifts gently into a new zone, less a market, more a gathering, not for buying, not for fixing, not even for eating. You've arrived at the floating stories zone, a living library of boats, bobbing beneath twilight. This part of the river moves slower. The paddles are stilled. The water mirrors the sky. And the people here aren't busy anymore. They're settled cross-legged, leaning, resting elbows on crates, cups in hand, voices low and steady. They're telling stories. You pass a boat where an old woman is speaking to 5 children, their chins propped on the edge of a fish basket. And the dragon, he dove into the river, where he waits even now. Hungry for lies, she says, eyes wide, voice roughened by time and tamarind tea. The kids giggle. One asks, "What if I lie on purpose?" She narrows her eyes and whispers, "Then I won't help you paddle when he grabs your ankle." Laughter echoes across the water. Nearby, a man reclines against a sack of onions, cigarette glowing. I once saw a market boat so loaded with rice it sank before reaching shore. The vendor climbed atop the sacks and just kept paddling like nothing happened. That's where we get the saying, "If you're sinking, sell faster." Historians often overlook these moments. There are no ledgers here, no artifacts, just air and memory and the way someone leans forward before the best part. But this drifting oral tradition is how the floating market remembers itself, one story at a time. A fringe belief among longtime traders if you tell the same story 3 nights in a row without changing a word. The river starts to believe it's true. So most people change just enough a wink here, a twist there to keep the river entertained, not convinced. You pass a teenager telling a ghost story. It wasn't her boat, he says, but she paddled it like it was. No one saw her come. No one saw her leave. Just the scent of frangipani and a wet spot on the deck. His friends pretend not to shiver. One pours water from a cup onto the wood and says, "Look, she's back." Everyone jumps. They laugh too loudly after. One boat is telling love stories, bad ones. Mostly. A woman recounts how she fell for a man who sold fake chili paste. "Too sweet," she mutters. "Should have known." Another shares how she met her husband because he accidentally stole her oar. He brought it back 3 weeks later, with a fish tied to it. A vendor tells the tale of a market cat who could predict monsoons by sleeping in a circle. Every time she curled left, the river rose. Right. The wind came. One day, she lay flat. We all stayed home. Good thing, too, 10 boats flipped that night. You float beside a boat where no one's speaking. Just a group of elders sitting quietly, sipping tea, staring at the horizon. You almost move on until one of them points at a distant bend in the river and says, "That's where I lost my first boat and found my second wife." Another vendor tells the story of the whispering tree, a banyan, whose roots dip into the water near the edge of the market. If you tie a fishbone to its branch and tell it a secret, he says, someone will confess something important to you within the week, but you'll wish they hadn't. You pass a small child telling a very serious story to a duck, and then the coconut fell on the ghost's head, he explains. The duck blinks slowly, and that's why we don't swim alone. The duck seems unconvinced. Another man shares tales of floating away unintentionally. "I was napping. The rope slipped. I woke up past the mangroves with a bucket of jackfruit and no clue where I was." He laughs. "Best nap I ever had." You hear a woman recount a time when the river froze just once, just briefly. It cracked like thunder, but no one believed me. I walked across it barefoot. The market kept moving below. The listeners nod, not because they believe her, but because she tells it well. One elderly man on a nearly empty boat stares up at the sky. "I once saw a star fall right into the river," he says. "Thought it was treasure. Turned out it was a lantern." He pauses, still made a wish. You pass a vendor who shares a story with every sale. "This mango," she says, handing one to a customer, "grew on a tree planted by a girl who ran away. They say her laughter still echoes when the fruit drops. The customer bites into it anyway." You drift into a quiet eddy where a lone man sings stories instead of speaking them. His boat is empty, but for a gourd-shaped instrument. His voice like wood smoke and twilight. You don't understand every word, but the melody curls around you like steam from tea. And finally, you come upon a boat with no speaker at all, just an open journal laid flat, pages fluttering in the breeze. You paddle closer. Each page is filled with handwriting, short entries, moments, names. Hua, sold 5 bundles of lemongrass. Laughed once. Tuan, lost his scale. Found a bird. River rose. We floated together. You close the book gently. Leave it open to the wind. As you drift away, you realize the market doesn't need monuments or archives. It has this stories whispered over soup, confessions tied to ropes, legends born of fish and foolishness, and you, floating gently among them, carrying one or two with you now. The stories stay with you as you drift downstream, their echoes trailing like lantern smoke in the twilight. But now, something shifts again. The river is darker, the sky deeper, and the market quieter. Not empty, not asleep, just settling. You've arrived at the sleep zone, the place where the floating market stops floating and starts dreaming. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no bell, no horn, just a collective exhale, a tightening of ropes, the soft knock of paddles being tucked away, boats pulling closer together, like animals huddling for warmth. What was once trade becomes hush. Conversation becomes murmurs. Meals turn into leftovers, wrapped in banana leaves and stashed near the stern. You float slowly now. Nobody rushes. They wouldn't even if the river rose. One boat is dimly lit by a single oil lamp. A woman brushes her daughter's hair with fingers instead of a comb. The child yawns, curls up beside a basket of herbs, and drifts off mid-sentence. You hear her whisper, "Tomorrow I'll sell all the basil," before she dissolves into sleep. Another boat lays out mosquito nets like wedding veils, tucking in corners with precision born of habit. A man slips under his net, scratches his belly, and mutters something about fish and luck. He's snoring before the thought finishes forming. Historians rarely mention the sleeping arrangements of floating vendors, perhaps because it's easier to study what they do awake. But here, in the dim quiet of the sleep zone, you see something else, the river not as a workplace, but as a bedroom, a living thing tucking its people in. A fringe practice, now fading, once held that each family boat must offer one story to the river before sleeping a thank you, a trade, or a confession. If the river likes it, they say, your dreams won't spill overboard. You glide past a boat where 3 siblings share a hammock. They've tied it to the oars. One turns and kicks in her sleep. The boat rocks, but nobody wakes. They've slept on water longer than they walked on land. Nearby, a man stretches out on a plank barely wider than his back. His pillow is a bag of limes. His blanket is a rice sack. He smiles as he sleeps, like someone whose bones remember the river's lullaby. A mother hums quietly while peeling roasted peanuts by moonlight. One by one, the shells plink into a pot. Her child is already asleep, clutching a spoon. The hum is off-key, beautiful. A dog circles twice on a mat and collapses with a sigh that seems older than the river. A cat needs a folded towel, then curls into a comma. Even the animals obey the shift. Trade is for the day. Stillness belongs to night. You float past a pair of vendors playing cards by candlelight. They don't speak, just shuffle, deal, nod. A hand is won, a hand is lost. Then one stands, ties the cards with string, and bows. Enough luck spent, he whispers. One woman reclines with a cup of tea balanced on her belly. She stares at the sky, not in thought, but in surrender. She sips once, places the cup down, and pulls a hat over her eyes. The tea is still warm. You pass a boat where a grandfather is gently rocking his grandson in a shallow basin. He wanted a cradle, the old man says, so I gave him a pot. The child snores. The pot creaks. In another boat, a woman lights incense and sets it beside a photo taped to the hull. She whispers something. You don't hear it. You're not meant to. A group of teens whisper and giggle, trying not to wake their grandmother. They fail. She grumbles, throws a pillow at them, then immediately starts snoring louder than all of them combined. The giggling stops. Respect is restored. You pause your paddling. Let the river do the work. Ahead, boats glow softly with lamplight. Some blink out, one by one. Others dim to embers. The market has no curfew, but everyone knows when it's time. You spot a boat with no light at all. Just a figure lying still, hands folded on his chest, lips parted in the gentlest breath. He's not dead. He's just the kind of a sleep you only earn after a full day of doing everything and nothing. Another boat rocks gently in the current. No net, no mat. Just a boy lying back with his arms spread wide, letting the stars watch him dream. A boat drifts past no oars, no anchor, just sleep. It moves like a question waiting for an answer. And then your own eyes begin to sting. You're tired, not just body tired, river tired, the kind of fatigue that settles behind your eyes and sighs into your lungs. You spot a small inlet, barely wide enough for your canoe. You angle toward it, tie up loosely, let your arms fall slack. Above, the stars gather, Below, the water slows. Around you, the market sleeps. And for the first time all day, the river makes no demands. The stars are soft tonight. They blur a little at the edges, like they're sleepy too. You lie back in your canoe, the curve of the wood fitting your shoulders just well enough to forget it's not a bed. Around you, the floating market breathes slow, even deeply human. This is the final layer, not the end, just the lowest tide, the hour when even the restless quiet, when the water hums lullabies you can't remember learning, but your bones respond like it's the only language they've ever known. One by one, you hear the last sounds fade. The creak of a paddle tied too loosely. The crackle of a lamp running low on oil. The muffled cough of someone half asleep, half still remembering something they forgot to sell. A child murmurs in a dream, somewhere. A bowl rolls gently across a boat floor and bumps against the hull. No one stirs. You turn your head and see a man sleeping with his hand still gripping a fishing pole, line dropped, bobber still dancing gently in the dark. He's not fishing now, he's just holding on. Next to him, a woman rests with a baby swaddled in her conical hat. Her boat drifts a little, rocks once, settles again. No one's watching anymore, and somehow everything feels more seen. You can't help but think about all that's passed through this place, goods and gossip, sweetness and salt, stories and storms, and how much of it will be remembered. Almost none of it. Not the price of rice, not the number of chilies, not the duck that caused a shouting match, not the girl who dropped a bowl and blamed a ghost. But maybe that's okay. Because the market itself remembers, in the planks of boats, the bend of paddles, the smoothness of stone tools, the soot inside cooking pots, the curve of someone's back as they fold into sleep. This place has no walls, no gates. It arrives every morning, fades every night, and tomorrow it will wake up again as if nothing happened. You close your eyes. The river cradles you. Above, the stars drift. Below, the current hums. Beside you, a boat gently bumps yours just once, then sighs away again, like a friend rolling over in bed. No alarms, no rush, just the hush of something ancient wrapping you in warm, invisible arms. You let your thoughts unspool like netting dropped into deep, still water. And with the market asleep, and the night grown soft, and the boat no longer swaying, you float too. Not just your canoe. You. You drift deeper and deeper until the water forgets your name and remembers only your peace. Now, the boats are still. The laughter has faded. The fires have cooled. The scent of grilled fish and river fruit is only memory, tucked behind your eyelids like folded silk. And your body, tired in that full, satisfied way, feels a little heavier in the best way possible. The night hums gently around you. You imagine the paddle resting beside your hand, smooth, worn, no longer needed. You imagine the lanterns floating far behind, their light distant, dim, and utterly unimportant now. You've seen them. That's enough. The river is quiet. Not because it's empty, but because it knows when to hush. The boats are dreams now, some tied to trees, some anchored in nothing but habit, all of them breathing with the slow rhythm of sleep, people curled around blankets, children clinging to baskets like they might grow wings, dogs snoring, cats blinking once, then giving in. And you still here, still afloat, still whole. Let your shoulders drop. Let your fingers relax. Let your breath soften, not because you're trying to sleep, but because there's nothing left to do. The market has folded in for the night, and you, lucky traveler, have floated to the very edge of the day. You've seen everything. And now, there's nothing left to carry, not even your name, if you don't want it. Just the sound of the water, the smell of quiet, the weight of a sky full of gentle stars. Sleep now. Sleep easy. You've earned this.